Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Thursday, November 12th, 2020. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps and steps and steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Ruth Ben-Ghiat. Strongmen from Mussolini to the present. Also on the program today, Joe Biden's historical lead and win continues to grow as more results come in. It's also historical in the size of electoral votes for a challenger. Meanwhile, Donald Trump continues his tantrum as just a few Republicans begin to get a bit restless. Joe Biden names Ron Klain, Democratic operative and lawyer, as his White House chief of staff. Good news in terms of dealing with COVID at the very least. Meanwhile, the State Department is preventing Biden from accessing messages from foreign leaders. They won't even forward his mail. Meanwhile, Oklahoma Senator Lankford claims he'll intercede if Biden doesn't get security briefings. COVID hits another infection peak as hospitals around the country are gearing up to make some horrible decisions. New York City contemplates closing its schools again, has the highest number of students going to school than any other city in the country. The Louisville Police Department apparently has been hiding records documenting sexual abuse of minors by 2 police officers. And the Proud Boys have a civil war brewing over them not being racist enough. And evidence emerges in Florida that someone bankrolled fake state house candidates to siphon Democratic votes. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. We have a new chief of staff. We will get to that in a moment. This story out of Florida is sort of fascinating. There were several Florida state Senate seats where there were candidates for these positions in some very close races, where somebody financed third-party candidates who would register as just independents, some of whom would have the same name as the Democrat running. People who spent no money in their campaigns whatsoever received one contribution to their campaigns each, which was just self-loans to pay for the filing fees. And a political action committee called Our Florida paid for all of its printed flyers and whatnot. And it is very difficult to find out who actually paid or funds the PACs because, of course, this is all dark money. This is a story from the local news 10 down in Miami. And you had a Democratic candidate, Jose Javier Rodriguez, who lost to the Republican. There was 208,000 votes, and he lost by like 65 votes. And the third party candidate, no party affiliation, who did absolutely no campaigning, was a man named Alex Rodriguez, and he received 3% of the vote, or more than 6,300 votes. There were other similar dynamics happening in that race. And so I guess the real question is that was there not just what happened in this state Senate race, but was this a practice across the country? And I don't know if it's illegal to do that, frankly. Anybody can run as far as I know, but it is it's an important dynamic to look out for. And maybe I don't know how you deal with something like that, but it is was a problem. Also, great piece in gizmodo.com saying that no, there was no glitch in the Michigan election software. It just wasn't updated. The software wasn't properly updated by the user there. So there was no, I mean, there have been countless numbers at this point of accusations around the country. Countless numbers by the Trump administration and the campaign, none of which, even if you add them all up, would change the outcome of this election, many of which completely disintegrate as soon as they get to court when they have to admit to a judge that actually, no, there's no fraud here. It's just a little bit weird. I saw one clip of a CNN host looking at the list of supposed suspicious voters from Nevada, and they were suspicious because they were all coming from these very strange states with acronyms that nobody knew, but they all turned out to be basically military votes. And then you had the biggest law firm working on the Trump, election denial tour, Snell and Wilmer, firm representing Trump in the Arizona election litigation. Arizona, incidentally, I think it was called for yesterday officially for Biden. That Snell and Wilmer has withdrawn from the case. They don't say explicitly why, but it's quite clear they didn't want to be associated with the charade that's going on now. Still, we have Republicans who are refusing to say, hey, what Donald Trump is doing is wrong. And then they, of course, get the benefit of saying it in private, and then everybody gives them that benefit. Well, I don't think they should get that benefit. I think if you're told something in private, then keep it to yourself. That's what I say, particularly if you're a Democratic politician or if you're a member of the press, because why do people accept the premise that they're lying in public, but they're not lying in private? I don't think they care in private either. I think this is a CYA operation. Make them pay a political price for what they're doing in public. And at one point, Mitch McConnell apparently assumes this is going to help him in Georgia. Well, that Georgia runoff election for Warnock versus Loeffler and Ossoff versus Perdue, that happens January 5th. They can't maintain this charade until then. Most of the supposedly contested, but not really contested states have a deadline by the end of this month, I believe, to have their electors in. So we will see how that goes. Meanwhile, despite the fact that the Government Service Administration has not signed over any resources to the Biden transition team, despite the fact that Joe Biden is not getting national security briefings like even Donald Trump did at this time after his election, despite the fact that the State Department is withholding messages for Biden from foreign leaders, Joe Biden has named Ron Klain his new chief of staff. Klain has been a longtime staffer for Joe Biden over the years. He was also chief of staff for Al Gore. He was also involved in the recount effort by Al Gore in Florida. He clerked for Justice Byron White. He headed the response to Ebola under the Obama administration. So at the very least, Ron Klain is perhaps the most experienced and knowledgeable person Joe Biden could have picked as chief of staff to deal with the response to COVID. He had a 2018 piece in Vox, of all places, extensive, talking about his concern that we were woefully unprepared for a potential pandemic in this country. Here he is this is in February, just 2 weeks after the first confirmed case, 9 months before the current White House chief of staff contracted the virus a couple of weeks ago. And here he is testifying on the actions that the Trump administration had taken up to that point. This is now, mid-February. Here it is.
We don't have a travel ban. We have a travel Band-Aid right now. First, before it was imposed, 300,000 people came here from China in the previous month, so the horse is out of the barn. Second, what we have restricted is not travel to or from China, but passports to and from China. There's no restriction on Americans going back and forth. There are warnings. People should abide by those warnings. But today, 30 planes will land in Los Angeles that either originated in Beijing or came here on one stops. 30 in San Francisco, 25 in New York City, okay? So unless we think that the color of the passport someone carries is a meaningful public health restriction, we have not placed a meaningful public health restriction. And then to get to your question, exempt from the president's travel restriction, of course, is the import of goods from China and, of course, the people who fly the planes and drive the boats that bring those goods from China. We couldn't ban that activity. We vitally need that. 90% of the antibiotics in this country come from China. All kinds of vital medical supplies. Dr. Nuzzo mentioned the PPE we will use to treat people. So travel bans, even putting aside Dr. Nuzzo's concern, that's not what we're imposing. That's not what exists. What we should be focused on is monitoring the people who are here, who have been in China in the past 14 days. That is complicated. That is hard. We built a path-breaking system to do that in the Ebola response. This is much larger and more complicated, and I don't think we've heard answers. I hope Congress will get them, but what the administration is doing on that, which really should be our public health priority.
So that was on February 5th, and what Klain is asking for at that time is the travel ban is silly, he's saying, particularly the way that it's constructed. It's meaningless. He said, what we really need to do is get answers on their ability to do contact tracing of these people. And of course, they never did get answers, or to the extent that we did get an answer, we know what the answer ends up being. Oh, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing any testing. We're not doing any contact tracing. In fact, can you imagine like going back in time and sitting down with Ron Klain saying, oh, not only are they not going to do any contact tracing or anything like that, they're not even going to acknowledge that this is real. No, we're going to hold off acknowledging it's real for a month or two And then we're going to go through an entire stage of denying that masks are in any way helpful. Then we're going to re-deny the existence of the whole thing, say it's a hoax. Then we're going to go into late stage denial where we say this is all going to go away if Joe Biden wins the election. And now here we are, over 140,000 infections yesterday. There are 10,000, almost 70,000 people in hospitalized now. That number has gone up by 10,000 over the past week and a half. We're at escape velocity now with this. It's not going away, incidentally.
Go back in time and tell him that, a year from now, you might be able to get started on some of this stuff yourself.
Exactly. But the problem is, as he said with that travel ban, is that the cows are outside the barn now. And so the strategy going forward is going to have to be try and mitigate and minimize until we get to a vaccine. Quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Ruth Ben-Ghiat about strongmen, authoritarians from Mussolini to the present. We'll be back in just a second, but first, a word from our sponsor today. Comes in Colors. Matt, put up this the site. This is a mask site, and also they've got these very fashion forward mask bags you wear around your neck, or you clip on that carabiner. Is that how you say that? Carabiner hook onto your belt or something like that.
Carabiner is what I...
Carabiner. Thank you. And they've got really stylish masks, and the mask bags, they make a great gift, Matt. I know you're looking for something for someone special. Great gift. Very fashionable. There you go. And they give part of their proceeds every month to a different charity or social cause. And I think for one more day, they have a coupon code, 4 Seasons. One word, 4 Seasons. Still piling on the Trump campaign. 4 Seasons gets you 10% off. So that's comesincolors.com, comesincolors.com. Just a reminder, this program relies on your support. You can become a member at jointhemajority.report.com. Also, check out Nomi's show today. Thomas Frank on for the entire episode, 3 p.m. Thomas Frank, youtube.com, The Nomaki Show. youtube.com, The Nomaki Show. Check that out. And also, don't forget justcoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. All right. I would like to welcome to the show Ruth Ben-Ghiat, author of, your most recent, is she here?
Yes. Hi.
Oh, hi. How are you? Your most recent book is Strongmen, the rise and fall of authoritarians. I've seen a couple of different titles of your book, and it's gotten me confused a little bit.
It's because there's the UK edition that has the long subtitle, and the US is From Mussolini to the Present.
Okay, well, there you go. And that gives a good description. Let's start just with why start with Mussolini?
Mussolini was the person who laid down the template. He laid down the foundation for authoritarian rule. And in fact, while he gets eclipsed by Hitler for good reasons, the way he actually took power is more relevant to what happens today, because he was appointed by the king, but he was a prime minister of a democracy for 3 years before he declared dictatorship to shut down a special investigation that would have put him in jail. Very contemporary.
I would say, yes. What's old is new again. Well, All right, so work out for us the taxonomy of authoritarians, of strongmen, of fascism, and maybe if you could also give us a definition of fascism and authoritarianism, so that we have a sense of just like, there's a quality to this of all German shepherds are dogs, but all dogs are not German shepherds necessarily.
Exactly. Trying to be succinct because these are big questions. So
we've got plenty of time.
The book is a look at 100 years of authoritarianism, which is at its most basic, a political system in which the executive, the leader, asserts an outsized authority and comes to domesticate varying degrees the judiciary, the press, the courts, and often has a personality cult. And this has evolved over 100 years. Fascism is one phase of this. It's in the origins of it, along with communism. And fascism was a hyper-nationalist, one-party state with a leader cult, very expansionist in a way that authoritarians today are not. And there's many other things one could say about fascism. But the category of strongmen that I use in the book refers to these kinds of authoritarian leaders who have a personality cult. They do all the things, shutting down, or threatening the press, trying to domesticate the judiciary. They use these tools of propaganda, corruption, myths of national greatness, but they also use this tool of virility or hypermasculinity. And their relations with other male leaders, and so the first template is Hitler and Mussolini, are very important in setting foreign policy. So I'm trying to I integrate in a way that other studies don't, masculinity as a strategy of political legitimation.
With that said, and I think, people can apply a lot of what you're saying. Obviously, we have an example, a very easy example for us right now to sort of like apply some of these things. But is it possible can you have a strong woman? As opposed to a strong man, a leader?
You can. In past history, there have been plenty of female tyrants. And there were leaders who were very strong executive presences, from Golda Meir to Margaret Thatcher, nicknamed the Iron Lady, to Indira Gandhi. But I don't have them in my book because I'm really looking at people who severely damaged or destroyed democracy. And because I wanted to isolate this mostly 20th century, but going into the 21st century, fetish of male power and the cult of male force that ties all of these other tools together. So if you think about like corruption, the strongman is a man who gets away with breaking the law. He gets away with breaking rules, and that's why people love him. So that's another reason in the conclusion, I say that there in the future, I believe there will be a female authoritarian leader. There's a lot of figures in Europe and the European far right who are leaders who are female, but I wanted to look at what we've had until now, and so I concentrated on men.
I maybe we should circle back around to this after we go through a couple of the figures that you talk about. But at the beginning of this pandemic, I interviewed a couple of epidemiologists, and one in particular, I asked, what is your greatest fear about this? And they said, my greatest fear is COVID 2022. And I guess to a certain extent, some of the big questions I have regarding Donald Trump and his authoritarianism and his strongman is really more because I'm curious about the next one and what exists in our society. Because you have, you go from the Seseko from the Congo, Modi and Duterte and Pinochet and Franco, Berlusconi, obviously Orban and Erdogan. But I'm curious, are there the context for these different? Is there something? Are there specific, I guess, countries or societies that are more open or susceptible or seeking this type of leader?
It's a great question, and one of the lessons of doing this history that's a global history is that no country in the right circumstances is immune from the appeal of a strongman. Now, the outcome is going to be very different. And so, for example, because I've worked on fascism for so long, people are always pressing me to say, is Trump a fascist? Call him a fascist. And I don't do that. I like to leave fascism for the early 20th century. But one thing that is in common, and these kind of patterns that the book brings out, is that when there's been a period where there's been a lot of social change, a lot of social emancipation, it could be workers' rights, it could be progress in racial equality, same-sex marriages in our own day. There's a lot of emancipation going on. And this leaves many people profoundly anxious or wanting to turn this back. And these are the periods of great change and transition, in which these figures find favor. And they often come up, sometimes they're from outside the political system, they seem new and exciting, they promise to make the nation great again, and great again also means stopping these emancipatory processes, right? But every time they're able to get into power, it's because there's been this kind of change, and people cling to them as a kind of new a hero. They feel their heroes are disappearing. If you just think of like men are not men anymore. When Trump got the nomination, InfoWars, the far right, had said, "Oh, men will be men again under Trump."
Right. Well, so I mean, and I can see. I mean, certainly, and also, we won't have a black president anymore. Would be one of the things on the list that they would be excited about. But how much of it is a strictly? I mean, you mentioned workers' rights, but how much of it is a function of these type of like emancipatory movements, but also coupled with economic difficult economic times? I mean, for instance, the most emancipatory period of our society, it seems to me, would have taken place perhaps in Reconstruction and also in the 60s, right? I mean, where we had broad emancipation, both racial in many respects, and I mean, obviously not total, but and in terms of gender, and we didn't see something like that then, or did we?
No, we didn't have an African-American president, and there is no discounting the fact that millions of people felt it was the end of what Stephen Miller says, Western civilization. They all talk about Western civilization. It's a code word. The affront of having Barack Obama as president, some people never got over it. And when people say that Obama lives in Trump's head, this is also common, that there's been a male leader who's very popular, and the strongman comes in and sees this as a rival. But yes, we had periods like the 60s, but they did not culminate in having a commander-in-chief and president who was African-American. And this was a line many thought should never have been crossed.
But when we look at, let's say, I mean, what were the, I mean, in obviously when we were talking about fascism and the rise of those authoritarian leaders, we were talking about a massive amount of economic deprivation, no?
Absolutely. And so their economic circumstances, mass unemployment. And I mean, fascism started after World War I. And again, this was the template and also a reaction to the Russian Revolution, which had just happened. And so it was a very, very particular period in society. But what's very interesting are the the political manifestations and tools of rule that came out of this have endured. If you think of personality cults, Mussolini, along with Lenin and then Stalin, he was the first to have a real personality cult. And the rules of those personality cults, how they work with propaganda, have actually not changed for a century. Even, of course, the people who have them change. So these are like these moments of, you could call them dysfunction because of economic difficulty, of vast change and instability. Some people see them as moments of celebration of progress, and some people see them as the end of everything. And this was the same in Spain in the early 30s before the coup that brought Francisco Franco to power. Women had been emancipated. They'd been a whole host of legal rights, and there was secularization. We can't forget about that, is also part of it. And so very often these leaders make deals with religious figures, religious institutions, regardless of how profane they personally are. So they shake up everything, but they serve to as profoundly conservative influences in society.
And how much are the elite, and by that I mean obviously the economic elite. What kind of buy-in do they need in these instances?
And this is another pattern that many of these men come from outside the system, and they depend on political and financial conservative elites to let them in. And so in the case of fascism, Italian fascism, because it's the first, was really interesting. So Mussolini gets invited in by the king, and he's propped up by the conservatives. They were called liberals, and so he had been a socialist, but he was certainly no socialist by the time he became prime minister. The first thing he does in 1923 is to privatize. So there's a sub-theme in the book of these strongmen who appeal to financial and business elites through privatization. So like we're talking the insurance industry, the telephone industry. So these are large-scale privatizations that he does immediately to keep the business class happy. And so this recurs over and over again, that without these elites, which are both financial and political, the strongman he can't get to power and he can't consolidate power.
Let's talk about when we look at, we talk about this notion of like a coup. How has the ascendance to power of these type of figures, how has the dynamics of that changed, or has it?
Yeah, it's a super interesting question. And so, the book is divided into three periods, and it's the fascist era, the age of military coups, because a huge number of the strongmen came in through coups. So I have Gaddafi, I have Pinochet, and Mobutu. And then we have the new authoritarian age. So after the end of the Cold War, when Soviet and US-backed coups became less common, you have the phenomenon of authoritarians getting in through elections. And the pioneer here was Silvio Berlusconi in Italy, who was, a business tycoon who owned television networks. He had a huge personality cult, and he was in through elections. And so today, there's many of the kind of ingredients in the authoritarian playbook have changed. There's less genocide, less public mass violence, more targeted violence like Putin has, more mass detention like Erdogan has. But you have a continuation of some of these things like the personality cult. And once they get in through elections, they have to manipulate elections to stay in power. And that's what Putin has done. And so when we look at Trump's attempts in this period to declare the results of our election as illegitimate, this goes, this has a lineage.
Well, so why have, I guess Hitler also attained power through election, right? But why is it that those, I'm looking at like even the coup that I think, many, including myself, would argue took place in Bolivia last year, was a softer coup than we have seen, let's say, Pinochet. what is it that has changed? That is what has changed? I guess that changes those different eras that you play out. I mean, what is happening with societies, or is there more stability being brought about by that elite class on some level, where I don't know, our economic interests, the corporations are now multinational, and so they're a little bit less inclined to have disruption of things, or what?
I think that's right. I mean, certainly the Cold War, which came after fascism, sustained that whole goal. It's called the golden age of military coups. And when the Cold War ended, so did...
People call that the golden age of military coups?
Yes, in coup studies, the 60s and 70s were the golden age. Yes, it's a problematic term, but that's the term that's used. And I think what you said is correct. There's less tolerance with capitalism being so global. There's less tolerance for disruption. There's also the effect of social media. And I write about the attempted coup against Erdogan in Turkey in 2016, where Turkey had a lot of coups, both military coups and constitutional coups, of kind of soft coups in this way. But so these officers did many things right, but they didn't capture social media. They captured CNN Turk, and that was this very dramatic moment when Erdogan was on the run for, fearing for his life, and he got on via FaceTime. And so the anchor held up her iPhone with his little face, and this was very important to him, seeming like a besieged figure, and he asked Turks to go out and save him and save the nation. And the coup hugely helped his popularity. But the coupists were not able to shut down social media. And so all over YouTube and other platforms and Facebook, there were damaging images of the violence that the coup was causing, and this caused public opinion to turn against them. So this is why it's harder these days to pull off a military coup.
And instead, it's more of, I guess, I feel, and I don't want to make it seem like we're necessarily out of the woods. I mean, I think Donald Trump has shown time and time again that both there's a considerable amount of incompetence in just about everything he does. But it also, he seems less inclined to consolidate power at times. Like, for instance, we could compare his reaction to COVID to maybe Bolsonaro's, who he doesn't seem to be using this as an opportunity. He's almost disaggregating power on some level in the context of COVID. What accounts for that, or is he really? I mean, he seems like a really weak strongman in some respects. I mean, just he has less. In other words, he's not looking to consolidate power as much as he's just sort of like has an agenda that rips through norms on some level.
The issue with calling him a weak strongman or a semi-failure is that what is the standard we're using? Because I hear this all the time. People write to me and say, you're crazy. He's not Putin. He's not Orban. But Putin and Orban started somewhere. Like, Putin's been there for 20 years. Orban's been there for a long time. Erdogan had himself appointed both president and prime minister, and he had the coup. That was there are these shock events, and that's one of them. And so Trump is just getting started. And another way to see this is that if we view him through the lens of democratic presidents, then he looks strange. But his aims have never been those of democratic presidents. He's not interested in public welfare, public goods. He's not interested in, again, the welfare of his people. He couldn't care less. That's why he gave up on COVID. His aims have always been to make money for the Trump organization and to build his personality cult. That's why he keeps having rallies, which, again, makes no sense by most logics to have rallies and further spread the pandemic. but his ego needs and his needs to keep his following far outweigh those. And he also does want to stay in power as long as possible. And now he has the perfect co-conspirators. So I talk about this in my book, of William Barr and Secretary of State Pompeo, who dutifully went in front of the cameras, the latter, and said, oh, yes, we'll have a transition to a second Trump administration. And the other thing to say about Trump is, whereas, and this is where his historical perspective puts him, it's interesting to look at him through this lens, that many leaders who had success in domesticating parties, they had founded those parties, like Berlusconi with Forza Italia, or Mussolini, or they'd been in a position of leadership in their parties, like Orban, for a really long time. Trump just came in from outside, and in 4 short years, he's wrapped that party around his finger so that they acquitted him at the Senate trial. Their 2020 party platform was like, dear leader, we're just supporting Trump. Right. And they're sticking with him even now. Only a few senators are going against this pretty naked power grab. So I see him as extremely successful at the things that he cared about most, which is loyalty and making money for Trump Organization.
Well, I mean, but he also, knock on wood, it appears he failed at maintaining power.
Yes, he did fail. And I don't think ultimately he's going to succeed in staying in power. I'm not using some people are using the word that there's a coup going on. There's an attempt to use every means possible to try, and legal means. And Donald Trump's mode of operation has always been to find loopholes in tax and regulatory and financial right. and in legal structures. That's how he operates. And again, he's got Barr there. And of course, he stacked the Supreme Court so that if it came to that, which there's precedents for, using the courts, letting courts decide things. So he was voted out, but the key thing is to look at how he's reacting now. He's not conforming to a democratic playbook. He's refusing to even accept the results.
Right. All right. So where does that leave us in terms of like the history of post strongmen? Like, I mean, it's almost as if, and because let's just assume that things continue on this trajectory, right? Where you have Langford saying, we got to get Joe Biden right into this, but not because he's going to be the president, but just in case he becomes the president, which is, maybe in some respects more reprehensible that he's, sort of like playing along with
he's hedging.
Right. But let's assume, because it's a totally different interview if Donald Trump actually doesn't leave the office, and we don't know what that, but let's assume that he does. Sometime in December, he begrudgingly says, yeah, maybe, whatever. In fact, I don't want to do this anymore. Michael Cohen says he's going to go to Mar-a-Lago for Christmas, and he's just not going to come back for the next 3 weeks, which actually sounds like exactly, what I would imagine him doing. But what happens when that's the way a strong man goes out? Or I guess maybe more generically, what happens to a society after a strong man? Like, is there, there are, I don't know, 30 million evangelicals, maybe more, who voted for him, 70 million people who voted for him, who, not all of them, but a significant percentage of those people see this guy as dear leader, as opposed to just a guy who gave us good tax cuts and is a businessman, et cetera, et cetera. What happens to those people after the fact? And how does the fact that Trump sort of like skulks away, does that drain the energy out of that authoritarian impulse and I'm talking authoritarian in terms of the followers?
Yes.
Or does it keep a significant potential there that Tom Cotton could come up and pick up and walk with?
Or Donald Trump in 2024.
Because
he plays with, because they always have to be campaigning. They have to have a cause. Michael Cohen's been right about, everything he's said, because he knows his subject. But we always have to remember that for regular Democratic presidents, the prospect of leaving office is a time to think about their legacy. For someone like Donald Trump, and he, again, unfortunately, his psychology checks every box of all the leaders that I've studied. The outcome's different. It's not a fascist outcome. But it's like a psychological annihilation for them to leave office. They can't imagine life without being adulated and having power to humiliate others. So that's why it's very difficult, and many of them meet a bad end. Now, when you think of somebody, the only one who was voted out of office was Pinochet in Chile. And he had over a year before he actually left office after the vote. And he tried to sabotage the new democracy as much as possible because they're very vindictive. And so he stacked the Supreme Court. Have you seen a lot of, in Trump world, you've seen a lot of movements of personnel, top positions being reshuffled. Authoritarianism is about the lack of accountability. And Donald Trump's always been about secrecy and lack of accountability. So he's trying to protect his secrets. He's getting I call it the end stage follies. I made a little video for Twitter about end stage follies. And so they're trying to do damage control here. But what he will leave is what happened also in Chile and Spain after Franco. And I'm not saying these are analogous because things work differently today. But he'll leave a deeply divided nation, and it's going to take us a very long time to heal from that polarization. But I predict that whatever role he has, he has to keep this polarization going, because the cult of victimhood, Trump's victimhood, is the foundational myth of the Trump world, that he's a victim. And he must keep this going to save face, no matter what he actually does.
In fact, I think there was reporting today that he's already talking about creating some type of digital media empire.
Yes. Truly, it's hard for people who don't have the psychology, and it was not fun to immerse myself for 2 years in these guys' heads. But you cannot underestimate the strength of their personality cult. And when you look at Berlusconi was finally forced out of office because of the Eurozone crisis and this massive sex scandal with underage, women and all these things. And he was not allowed to run for office as part of his punishment, although he never went to jail. But the next time elections came around in 2013, his party almost won again. And this was his party. It had the same relation as Trump has the GOP, wrapped around his finger. So even though they leave office, the attachments that they've formed, the leader-follower relationship, it's really hard to dissolve it.
Is that a function of Trump or of the followers? I mean, I've been, for 4 or 5 years now, I've been trying to get Bob Altemeyer, who you may be familiar with, who has done the sort of the clinical research on this, and we're talking about maybe he'll come on and discuss it. But when he says authoritarian, he's talking about the followers, and he had said, 10, 15 years ago, 25% of North Americans are authoritarians, and they're just waiting on some level, lying dormant, waiting for somebody to show up, and Trump shows up. Are they now in a sort of like a hyperactive state so that the next person who comes by doesn't even have to have necessarily the same attributes that Trump has, but is their hunger satiated or aroused, I guess, is my question.
It's hard to know this. I totally agree, and this is the line I take in my book, that the GOP was already drifting in an authoritarian direction, and many Americans were identifying more with kind of wanted strong leadership. And this is, again, back to the discourse of Obama, who was constantly feminized and treated as a weak ruler, to the extent that we have not assessed, his military actions, all the drones, in the way that we might in the future. But it's a very special blend of, I call it seduction and threat, that these showmen have. And so nobody is going to do it quite like Trump. And part of their appeal is that, on the one hand, they're bullies. On the other hand, they are very vulnerable and open and emotional. And Trump talks about, I love you. I love the leader of North Korea. He doesn't salute the flag. I have a picture in my book. He hugs the flag, which you're not supposed to do. But again, no boundaries. And so people feel very protective of these leaders, even though they're also bullies. It's a very complex masculinity. And also they're constantly whining, the victims and poor me. And this runs counter to traditional notions of virility, of the strong and silent type. Donald Trump is not strong and silent. He's whiny, but it makes people feel attached to them. So to answer your question, someone else could come along and marshal those energies for law and order. And a lot of people, this is what concerns me, people like Barr and others have invested a lot because they have a long-term agenda, and everybody's is a little bit different. Barr's is also to decrease secularization, separation church and state, et cetera. But they don't want to give this up. They've come so far and they were almost ready to consolidate, and now they have to give it up. So they could revive this with somebody else. But that person isn't going to have the degree of charismatic bond with the followers that Trump does, because Trump is a unique individual in that way. He comes from reality TV.
Right.
So
they may have to resort to maybe more explicit mechanisms once they get in the position of doing that, because they don't have that sort of softer allure, I guess.
That's right. And that's why these men are kind of not unique, but they have a very specific temperament, and they're all the same. They all whine about being victims. They're all irascible. They're all impulsive. The way their governments are, a revolving door of people getting fired. So I have these. This is why the historical perspective is really useful. So they all like to humiliate people when they fire them. So Mussolini's party had a very big position, found out by reading in the newspaper that he was fired. And then Mobutu used to hold rallies, and everybody had to be there sitting, and he would announce who was fired. So you're finding out in front of all your peers. And then we have Rex Tillerson, the first Secretary of State, who was seated on the toilet, scrolling through Twitter, and found out via tweet that he had been fired. But the mechanism of humiliation so that they feel more important is the same.
Tillerson didn't have to let us know about that fact, about exactly where he was. But Ruth Ben-Ghiat, the book is Mussolini to the Present. Fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We will put a link to that book at majority.fm. Take a quick break. Back in a second. And we're back. Let's, I guess we will see what happens with Trump going forward. I mean, it is starting to feel like it's falling apart around him a little bit. There just seems to be a little bit more tentativeness. But again, the problem that we're going to have here is like, where's the off ramp for Donald Trump? Like, how does he walk away from this without being more humiliated at this point, unless he just surrounds himself with the tens of millions of people he will be able to convince that he actually won, but for the good of the country, he's decided to step aside. Here is Kayleigh McEnany. This is sort of fascinating. She's on Fox and Friends. She is the White House press secretary. So sometimes you'll hear like, you'll see a briefing at the Pentagon, and the Pentagon press secretary will say, I don't have any information on that. You're going to have to go ask Treasury, or you're going to have to go ask the White House. So here is Kayleigh McEnany, the White House press secretary, on Fox and Friends.
A Republican, he said, listen, give Joe Biden the presidential daily brief. After all, Senator,
Harris gets
can't see that video, Matt.
Committee.
Sorry,
She's getting.
we get some problems with that video. Let's try it one more time.
A Republican, he said, "Listen, give Joe Biden the presidential daily brief. After all, Senator Harris gets. She's on the Intel Committee. She's getting. She has high level security access. Has the president considered that?"
I haven't spoken to the president about that. That would be a question more for the White House, but I will say that all laws are being followed with regard to an expected transition, though we expect to continue on as the Trump administration. We will see how our litigation goes.
A Republican, he said.
There you go. So have you, are you doing the things you're supposed to do by law in terms of this transition? You'd have to ask the White House. Is she asking, like saying, like literally ask the White House? Wouldn't you ask the White House press secretary who you are? That's an interesting trick. Nobody wants to be the person who has to tell Donald Trump that he lost. All right, folks, we'll talk more about this, obviously, tomorrow in the coming days. It is just a countdown before he is carried out of that White House, or maybe he just goes on an extended vacation to Mar-a-Lago. We shall see. And for those of you sticking around for the fun half today, we got the whole crew in there. Brendan is out today, but Matt be there. Do we got Jamie and Emma and old Matt, new Matt?
Yeah, they should be joining momentarily here.
All right. Well, just a reminder, this program relies on your support. When you become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com, you not only support the free show, you get extra content in the fun half. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Don't forget to check out Nomi show today, youtube.com, the Nomi Key show. She's got Thomas Frank on today for the entire hour, I think. He's a great guest. You should check that out. Also, AM Quickie. You can find it on our app at majorityapp.com. And you get our app. Our app is completely free. You can listen to the AM Quickie. You can get your member feed, or you can listen to the free show. You can also watch the video of the show live. You can IM the show through the app. We've got a lot of other features coming with that app in the days and months and weeks ahead. In addition, we've got a merch store. You can find it at shop.majorityreportradio.com. Get your carpenter pencil or your sweatshirt. And here's Emma and Matt and Jamie. Guys.
What's up, everyone? How you all doing today?
Hello.
What, Jamie, what's happening on the Antifada?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. This week on the Antifada, the boys have a very interesting chat with our friend Eric John Russell about a topic I know is close to your heart, Sam. Situationism.
Oh,
DeBoer, the Society
really?
of the Spectacle.
Very much so. It's been a while, but
and they also talk about Trump's failed coup attempt and basically why it failed. And they give some takes on what they think is coming down the pike. So that's at patreon.com/theintifada. Also, still good. I'm going to plug this because I'm actually on it. Our interview with angry workers from last week. A lot of young people, young socialists all over the globe are disillusioned because our electoral movements, we got owned, folks. We got owned. The Corbynites in the UK got owned. The Burning Kids in the US, we also got owned. And some people are like, well, what the hell are we supposed to do? Should we keep doing this thing? Are there other things we could be doing? That's where angry workers come in. They started a collective They got jobs at Amazon. They got jobs at food manufacturing factories in West London for 6 years. They conducted a workers' inquiry. They talked to people. They formed a solidarity network. They agitated on the job. They circulated a newspaper, and they wrote a book about it. So that came out last Wednesday. And then on Friday, for patrons, we kind of did the full Monty and talked about their chapter on insurrection and production and all of the concrete steps that folks would need to take to have a successful working class revolution in the UK and, you know, hopefully all around the world. So check that out. Patreon.com/theantifada.
And old Matt, what's happening on New Matt, what's happening on TMBS?
Well, we had Gene on to react to some of the attacks on the left coming from the Democratic Party. Also, David Griscom and I will be doing a think tank stream for patrons on Sunday. So check that out. Patreon.com/TMBS. And I'm going to Twitch stream soon at twitch.tv/literary hangover.
Old Matt, what's happening on Doomed?
I just got to say, Jamie is undefeated when it comes to promos. I mean, she could just promote nonstop. It's amazing.
You know, it's really because I'm doing it off the top of my head. If I had taken the time to edit it down, I'd be much more succinct.
It doesn't come naturally to me to promote anything. I just am not good at it. So I could learn some tips from you.
I learned from the master, Michael.
Yeah, Michael was a promo machine, right?
Promo machine.
So youtube.com/Matt Binder. Tonight I'll be going live at 9 p.m. and we will be talking about the right's failure to cope with the results of with the results of this election. And we'll be looking at some in my opinion, very funny videos. And also we'll be taking a look at the social networks that they're running to called Parler and MeWe in order to right. Yeah. And able to sort of form their own little social media bubble so they could keep pretending that Donald Trump's the president. We'll see.
I was thinking about joining Parler. What do you think about that?
You know, Parler is just they're so bad. Like, honestly, the user interface and just how they're set up, it's just like that's why these sites will never get big.
Curious. It's more like curious.
I'm on there. I went on there and I registered my username specifically to. I also registered the username of a very prominent right winger who wasn't on there yet, and I don't want to ruin it by letting anyone know who I'm.
Good for you. Good for you.
This is the right wing Twitter, right? That's what it is.
Right, and MeWe is the right-wing Facebook. They're sort of going to compete with each other because there's only going to be room for one. And I guess
there's a further right Facebook than the already existing Facebook.
yes, because they're welcoming all the conspiracy theorists who aren't allowed to be on Facebook anymore, like the anti-vaxxers and the QAnon people. So that's what MeWe basically is. Although, unlike Parler, it wasn't set up to be that way. They're just, it just happened to go that way for them, and they're welcoming them with open arms.
Right.
There's also
named
like
after the sound your brain makes when it finally dies.
There's also the right wing. There's also the right wing YouTube, which is a BitChute that's gaining prominence too. But we'll take one at a time, one step at a time.
All right. Well, guys, have a good show. See you. See these guys in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27.
1/2, 5/8, 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd, don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're not paying.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way. Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up.
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
All right, we are back on the fun half of Majority Report Thursdays. I'm Matt Binder, and how you doing, Emma, Jamie, Matt?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm Emma Vigeland, for all of those who can't pronounce my last name yet. I get a variety of different ones, Vigeland, Vigeland, but it's Vigeland, or my really pretentious side of the family likes to go Vigeland, which I refuse to do. Yeah, because it's Norwegian. Still haven't fixed
that background, I see. Still looks like your wall is melting back there.
Well, honestly, it's like become more and more like a poster as it creases throughout the week. We're coming up with a substitution, so I don't really have a leg to stand on anymore in saying mine looks better than yours, Matt. So
there you go. Well, you should get a green screen, and when you get that green screen, I can provide you with the beautiful photo I took of the Majority Report background that I use right behind me.
Yeah, I know this photo that Sam took, by the way. Like the white balance is totally off. Like this is orange, yellow, whatever that is.
Yeah, that's
sick burn. Well,
Sam's fault.
Not everyone's as good at everything as I am, but I understand.
Maybe someday Sam will buy me a green screen, and then I can go back to broadcasting from the hallway from The Shining.
Oh, yeah.
Was that your old studio space?
Oh no, I had a fun Zoom background on when I was talking to my friends, and then I kept it on by mistake for the show, and it was kind of funny.
Oh, like literally the actual Shining hallway. That's hilarious.
Yeah. I want to go back.
How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing very well. I'm not
going to join us on the video today.
Well, I don't want to join you guys in the video because then somebody's face is going to be covered by the logo. So I'm just going to let you guys roll with it today.
Thanks,
very kind.
That's a nice luxury that you have because I have to
should
put
move
on
the
makeup
logo,
and look presentable.
Oh, I gave up on doing that maybe week 1 that we were doing this. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, I barely put on makeup. I've been told I should watch some of those online tutorials, and that just gets in the way of the nonsense I do in my free time. So,
no.
Well, I just like to say that everyone on this feed right now, Jamie, Emma, even I could just imagine what Matt looks right now. You're all looking wonderful, so don't worry about it.
Thank you.
Oh, buddy.
Not as good as me, but
actually, Binder. If you can in the settings, I don't know if you want to do it now, but you need to enable HD video because everybody else's video looks better than yours.
That's why he's looking so good, because he's not in HD.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that 540p.
No, I'm in HD. I'm enabled HD.
Oh, really? Oh, well, it
Yeah,
does not
that's
remotely.
weird.
Yeah, that's strange.
Huh.
Well,
we'll figure it
nevertheless.
out.
Anyway,
would you you guys have a specific clip you'd like to kick off today's show with? Anyone? I know, Jamie, you had a few clips you were talking about.
I kind of want to end on the Bolivia one because it's uplifting, and I feel like the rest of the things we talk about are going to be depressing.
All right. So while we think of some videos to clips to play, let's go to the phones and take today's first caller. 908. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, it's Evan. I'm calling from New Jersey.
Hi,
Evan.
Evan.
I want to talk about COVID 1, your best friend Nancy Pelosi 2, and Emma, maybe some Nick stuff at the end really quick. So
Nick stuff. Oh, I would love to talk about the Knicks. Are you going to bring up Russell Westbrook?
We're never going to talk about Russell Westbrook.
Okay, good. Because there we go.
Yeah. First off, I think that we have to really start thinking about the worst case outcomes for COVID, why there's a Marxist answer to that, and how we can start preparing for the environment to come.
I'm
if we're
listening.
scared about Utah, yes, okay. So if we're scared about Utah, we need to be scared about Alaska, Iowa, Idaho, and Wyoming. You can throw Wisconsin in there too, but basically the amount of ICU beds they have and the way COVID's going, really bad. Bad in the sense that it'll basically be destabilizing. People are just going to take any answer they can get, and any real solutions can only really be answered through Marxism, Medicare for all. That's going to be the most important thing, no matter what anyone says anymore. So, I mean, it's proven in the election. If you run a Medicare for all, guess what? You win your election. Just kind of benefit.
Yeah, I mean, I think just quickly to add to your point, I think leftists could take a page out of disaster capitalists' playbook here and use this opportunity, it's a deadly opportunity, but use that empty space and everything with COVID to push for Medicare for all.
Yeah. Absolutely. We need to take these openings as they come. I gotta say, I think things are probably going to get worse before they get better, if they ever do get better. And you brought up Marxism, so I'm gonna go a little further down this road. Okay, we are in an omni crisis right now, and this financial crisis was coming regardless of COVID. Because capitalism is an inherently unstable system where the rate of profit tends to fall over time, causing periodic economic crises. Now, if you combine that with this virus crisis, this biological crisis, and, the climate crisis that has been looming on the horizon for a long time, plus the social crisis, by which I mean we're all atomized, we're all fucked up and anxious, we're alienated, profoundly alienated from one another in society.
Because of capitalism.
Because, yes, we have a system that dissolves all social bonds and mediates person to person purely via the market. What we have is a real shitstorm. And yes, I believe in the short term, we should be pushing for better, more social democratic, redistributive policies. However, at the end of the day, we still got to take it all the way. Medicare for all would be a huge improvement. But does it solve the crises of capitalism? No, it doesn't. So I think everyone needs to be thinking super, super hard right now about how we make this very difficult transition, which, if it succeeds, will be the greatest achievement in human history. And it's a lot to wrap your mind around. But I think people need to it's an all hands on deck situation. And I don't know if we're going to be able to avert this deepening of crisis. I don't know if we're going to be able to avert a civilizational collapse, but I do know that we need to be more prepared than we are now for when it happens, because what comes after capitalism and neoliberal capitalism is in crisis all over the place. It is in its death throes. It is in its terminal crisis, and nobody knows what's going to come afterwards. And, if we don't have substantial working class power, what comes afterwards is definitely going to be worse than what we have now. So everyone needs to be thinking, organizing, educating themselves and each other.
I would just say, I wouldn't overstate the crisis it's in terms of the weakness, because the stage it's in now, where it just learns that we have the most powerful government and we can just use its printing press to print money and give it to corporations. Corporations are actually fine right now. And that's a terrifying thing. And I do think decommodifying healthcare would take a huge arrow out of capitalism's quiver, because I think that is a big check that they've had on progress for a long time.
Yeah, it's amazing that in the pandemic, we basically socialized the stock market and nothing else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you want to get pedantic about it, Medicare for all would not actually decommodify healthcare. It would still be a commodity, but it would change who's paying for it. But certainly, if we're not all just struggling to stay alive, folks are going to be in a better position to fight.
I'm sorry. Did you guys not receive your $1,200 check?
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have been grateful about that.
I was for a second.
To be grateful.
Right.
Because we're all so cucked. I was like, oh, thanks, Trump. And I'm like, what the fuck am I talking about?
We are. We're so cucked.
Speaking of how we're cucked because of, I just want to say, if I can only say this, Matt, your best friend Nancy Pelosi, if Keepers, if that documentary on Netflix has any shred of truth to it, your best friend Nancy Pelosi is not looking too hot, and it's because of her brother.
Well, listen, I prefer Pelosi over Jeffries. I'll tell you that much. If we got to pick between those two,
Look, yeah, the Jeffries is very aggressively anti-left in a way that I don't.
Jeffries has went after the staff of both AOC and Ilhan, if memory serves.
Yes.
Or maybe right,
Mm-hmm.
He's
and
absolute
Pelosi
menace.
just went after Ilhan, so
yeah, they're the same thing.
The same thing.
You're right. What the nice thing about getting Pelosi out would be to lose that continuity of her power. But is the continuity really that broken if it's Jeffries and he can just hold that position down for another decade, which is
and also have the cover of being a new face and a fresh slate where he can do things behind the scenes and people won't be paying attention.
Yeah, it's not looking good, folks. I gotta say, I think the centrist wing of the party, which is to say most of it, the power center, is very angry at the left because the left almost took over, and they're going to be disciplining and isolating the left using all of the power that they have going forward. So I don't want to be a doomer, but we really need to be looking to tactics outside of the electoral realm, in addition to, what AOC and the squad are doing, which I don't want to yuck anyone's yum. I think it's good that they're doing it. I'm skeptical of, how much it's going to achieve in the time frame that we have. But we need to be trying everything right now, folks, and definitely starting to see our electoral campaigns as something that supports our other work in building a large, militant, radical working class base with institutional power independent from either of the capitalist political parties.
All right.
Caller, what's your next question, though, really quick?
Okay.
Give it to him.
I'll answer really quickly.
Yes. Is Killian Haynes your son? And if he's not, why is it not Kira Lewis Jr.?
You know who I like in the draft? Actually, I really like Devin Vassell, and I like Killian Haynes
also
too. But
like that too,
right? Because
I just what you guys are talking about.
I think that fits the defensive philosophy that they're going to be implementing, and I'm super pumped for Neil Aquina to have a coaching staff that matches his skills. So
this is sports.
Frankie Drips.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Frankie
Smokes.
Frankie
Drips.
Love him to death. Love him to death. All right, thanks so much, man.
Oh man, we got goths, pugs, and jocks on the show now.
See, I'm not even that good at sports, but I love watching sports. So eventually I'll have my own sports show. That'll be my next.
You just described most people. I mean,
right, but I'm obsessive, so it's a different level, and also I'm a girl, so most people don't expect it. But it takes over my life.
Whoa! That's very sexist of you, Emma.
Yeah, I'm sexist. No, that's the expectation. I mean, people don't like it. When I start talking about sports, I can literally watch people get confused, and then they'll settle in.
I'm just confused because I don't understand what you're talking about.
That's why I kept it super brief, and then we're on to the next.
No, I appreciate it. Well, maybe when we get full communism and solve all of the political crises, you can do a show about sports, and I can do a show about music.
Yeah, there we go. Right, like our different. And I had a really bad music take last night because I'm a plebe or a pleb when it comes to music. I don't really have the most amazing taste, but I feel like you could totally own me there, Jamie.
Oh.
Just to clarify, that anti-feminist take is not the expectation of one Matt Binder, allied to women everywhere.
So. Right. Thank you for your virtue signal, man.
Oh, you get a cookie.
Yeah, congrats.
Feminist ally.
Thank you. All right, let's go back to the phones and talk to 570. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Aaron from Pennsylvania.
Hi, Aaron from Pennsylvania. What would you like to talk about
Well,
today?
from Reading, I guess.
Okay.
Sorry. I wanted to call in and ask about the efficacy of, especially in local elections, running, I guess would be progressive candidates on the Republican ticket in areas where, the Democratic Party is completely spoiled, especially where I grew up. A Democrat won't win basically ever. So I was curious to see what you thought about that, if what sort of strings might be attached to it. I know Kowalski did that in Nebraska, and so that's where I'm at.
I think it's an interesting idea. I mean, look, the idea behind socialists running on a party, either Democrats or Republicans ticket, is to let them spend the money and the resources maintaining the ballot line and use their ballot line like a parasite, because that is the only chance you have of winning. Now, what recently happened to Jeremy Corbyn being expelled from the Labour Party actually made me feel a little tiny bit more optimistic about socialist electoral chances here, because just running on their ballot line doesn't necessarily mean that you are subject to their discipline in the same way, because we do not have traditional political parties here in the U.S.
We have a really weak party in the Democrats.
Yeah. So that is not a bad idea at all. We can do that opportunistically, no matter which party. Of course, the party isn't going to help you win in the general if you do that with the Democrats or the Republicans, but it's not a bad idea. As long as you have like an independent base of power and resources, which is what you need no matter which party you're running in.
Right. Lovely. Yeah, and I'm even thinking of examples like in my district in the Berks County, in the state Senate in Pennsylvania, the Republican ran unopposed. And I'm thinking if you can get into positions like that in central Pennsylvania, there are all sorts of unopposed Republicans running. You find someone retiring and you fill that spot, you're there already. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's kind of. Are you outside? I can hear your the traffic outside your.
Yeah, I'm a truck driver, so if it's loud, I mean, feel free.
Are you calling from your truck? I love that, actually.
The workers are here.
I'm calling on work hours.
Oh, hell yeah. That's praxis, baby.
That's how we do here on the Majority Part, right? I love that. Yeah. It is a little bit noisy, though, and I'm trying to play with the levels here while I'm also, because you're coming through my end via the mic. So I'm going to have to let you go, but thanks for calling in. Definitely call in again.
Understandable. Thank you.
Okay. You guys have a clip you want to get to?
Sure, yeah.
Down.
I think.
Oh, did you see? Hold on, did you see this? I don't know if Sam mentioned it because I tuned in late because I was getting things ready over here. Corey Lewandowski has COVID.
No.
We have not mentioned that, no, but that is news.
Yeah, I mean, like this is the second outbreak, right? This is the second that in that situation room on election day. It seems like a lot of people passed around COVID there. It's the least shocking thing in the world.
I mean,
and he was hanging out with. I'm seeing this right now. I mean, if you've been watching the election coverage for this past week on like MSNBC and Fox and CNN, Lewandowski's been hanging out in Philly recently. He was at the Four Seasons Total Landscaping with Rudy Giuliani and Pam Bondi. But somehow Rudy Giuliani, he was also in that room with Chris Christie and everyone else who got COVID the last time around. He somehow has escaped COVID so far.
Or he wouldn't tell you. We also have news that NBC News reports that RNC Chief of Staff Richard Walters also has tested positive for COVID-19. So,
hell yeah.
And this is on top of, didn't they announce, was it yesterday or the day before, Ben Carson?
Oh, yeah, Carson got it. I mean, this is the thing is like, it takes actual real journalism to get these disclosures made, I think, because we had the story out of Pennsylvania early in this thing where Democrats were like, oh, yeah, Republicans were positive for COVID and didn't tell anyone in our caucus and were just showing up for work about it. Like, yeah, I mean, it's psycho, but I find it interesting when we actually do hear about it.
Yeah, I mean, Rudy Giuliani, like right after everyone got it the first time, was spewing his spit all over cable news in the way that he just like, shrieks. He reminds me of that character Gru from Despicable Me. I don't even know. Maybe he can't get COVID because he's not even a human being. He's just like a cartoon character come to life. So he's immune by definition, but or maybe he has O blood, which makes it very less likely for you to get it. O gang here. Right?
I'm not even sure what kind of blood I have.
I'm also O.
Yeah, apparently there's some correlation. I mean, that's not definitive science yet, but they think maybe blood type could potentially be connected to your propensity to have to get it and also have severe symptoms.
Jamie, the vampire over here, doesn't know her blood type. What's going on over here?
I have whatever type of blood the person I've been feeding on that day has. That's how I get my blood.
Very good. Nice save, Jamie. Or Count Von Peck.
That's right. More women counts. That's what I say.
Can I pull up that Deutsche Bank thing, Matt? Because
please.
I really want to talk about that.
Let's do it.
So a new headline in Bloomberg, and this is being argued by the Deutsche Bank vampire, speaking of, saying that remote workers should be taxed for the privilege of earning a living from home. They are now saying that. Matt, do you have the screenshot of the tweet? Yeah. So there you go. And if you click on it, they're talking about how, because it's the new normal, after the pandemic is passed, people need to be taxed. Remote workers need to be taxed for the privilege of not getting COVID and working from home. The team proposed a 5% levy for those who work from home on a regular basis and not because of a government lockdown mandate. Such a measure could raise $48 billion in a year in the US. And about 16 billion euros in Germany, they say, to fund subsidies for low-income earners and essential workers who are unable to work remotely. Okay, but like maybe fund that in a different way, potentially via a corporate tax, and don't penalize people from working from home. I mean, the only way for them to imagine that they're, helping workers is a punitive tax on other workers.
Yeah, and how much of that tax money do you think would actually go to helping essential workers?
Exactly.
I don't trust the government to do that. Also, like, people don't have a choice. Like, if you can work from home, you have to work from home.
Right.
Like, if I showed up to the studio tomorrow, Sam would be like, "What the hell are you doing here, Jamie? Get out of here!" Like the first time when I showed up when I forgot that I wasn't supposed to. Also, this is terrible for class solidarity.
Exactly.
Right? Because whether you are a white collar worker working from home or an essential worker delivering food, you are both part of the working class. You're working for a wage. And this seems like a way to further drive a wedge within an already segmented working class in ways that will not result in mass solidaristic action.
Yeah, I mean, it's very kind of Deutsche Bank to start to worry about how we can start funding essential workers and such. But I know where we can find some money. How about billionaires? Just take the money that they've made during this.
Exactly. Just tax the rich, not the workers working from home. I mean, it's so much easier, and more simplistic. But of course, they're not going to come to the conclusion that they should pay money for.
It shows the state. I think it shows the sophistication of the public on this stuff is slowly getting to the point of like, why are we doing this? And like the fact that they put as the second bullet point, like this will help us fund essential workers and stuff. I mean, obviously that's not Deutsche Bank's priority. That's not why they're doing any of this stuff, is to make sure the man left out or the people like that. That's just PR. It's pure public relations. And it's interesting that how much precedence that they have to give that now. I mean, obviously Deutsche Bank should be occupied. It's horrible, like bunch of criminals.
I mean, it's the number one bank that criminals like Trump, for example, most famously, but also in the past, weren't they laundering money for terrorists? And also, I think that was Deutsche Bank. Yeah. Right. So they are one of the most underregulated and criminal banks in the world.
There's a book out, I haven't read it, but Dark Towers, Deutsche Bank, Donald Trump, and the Epic Trail of Destruction. I mean, that might be a Resistance-y Trump book. Deutsche Bank has a lot of other shady connections besides Donald Trump.
Yes, it wasn't just him. They've had a history of sheltering money, funneling money through for shady organizations. And then, of course, they're just looking out for essential wage workers by taxing work from home workers and floating that, please.
I mean, they're really they're really looking out for their customer base. I mean, that if any bank put out like that suggestion, it's not too surprising. But coming from them specifically, like they don't. How many customers do they have that are not insanely wealthy or at least moderately wealthy? Like they don't. How many essential workers, other than maybe like doctors, maybe, do they have as their customer base? Really, I mean,
yeah, no. But if you are a white collar worker and you're working from home and you do want to kick a little money to essential workers, tip the people who bring you your food more. That's what I got to say about that. Tips. If you haven't increased your tipping by like 100% in this pandemic and you can afford to do so, you need to rethink some things.
Also, what about all the money that working from home is saving in terms of, just think about the environmental
rent on your right, exactly. Rent on the company's space. And right, I think I just want to correct myself really quick. Yeah, right. I just want to correct myself really quick. I think that might have been HSBC that laundered the money for terrorists. So
Deutsche Bank definitely has money laundering issues. I don't know specifically with terrorists, but I mean, if not terrorists, I mean.
Yeah. I think I got that one part.
I mean, Trump's a customer, so we know there's something.
But well, yes, Deutsche Bank is criminal.
Another customer is Jeffrey Epstein. Deutsche Bank made a response after the New York State Department of Financial Services imposed a financial penalty of $150 billion on the bank. Deutsche Bank knew about Epstein's horrible criminal past and still did nothing about the regular suspicious withdrawals, the advisory body said. So, I mean, and that's just one example. I mean, there's numerous other ones. Violations of U.S.-Iran embargo. I mean, if they want to do business with Iran, maybe somebody should be doing it instead of the sanctions. But interest rate manipulation, money laundering with Russia. I mean, that bad bank. I mean, banks are bad generally, right? But Deutsche Bank is a particularly bad bank.
Deutsche Bank.
But one thing about what Emma said, because I was thinking about that too, but a lot of companies actually are sort of angry about the situation with the working from home, all like the sudden move to working from home that wasn't part of their plans, because a lot of them are stuck in long lease agreements, so they're paying for these mega skyscrapers in New York City, for example, 2 floors there and hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. and they can't get out of them, and there's no one working in there. So that's probably why they're a little bit angry about that and looking to punish.
Boo.
They're looking to punish the work from home, those working from home in some way, you know?
Yeah, it's also how they discipline their workforce, right? Like, how many of us have had jobs where there was absolutely no reason for you have to go into an office, but they made you do it anyway? Like, it was like that for me at my last blogging job. And now all of a sudden people are like, oh, wait, we can work from home and everything runs just as well as it did before. I think it's going to be very hard to claw that back from people.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube there, because people are going to recognize that, yeah, this is all just so they could either lord over me or so that there could just be some semblance of control.
You hear that, Sam? Jamie is never going back to the studio again.
I actually kind of miss going to the studio, if only because I'm not good at exercising apart from riding my bike. And it was like a nice little 25-minute bike ride to the studio and then back again, which I no longer do.
I loved walking through downtown Brooklyn on the way to work. That was a nice little, breakup of your day.
Yeah, and I also just feel like it's, for our job specifically, chemistry and like back and forth is easier when you're in person.
I know.
You guys could still go out and take a walk. I mean,
no, but it's like you're being forced to do it, you know? I mean, I'm
exactly.
bad at making myself exercise in my free time, but maybe y'all jocks, maybe you jock folks can give me some tips after the show.
Who's that? Just me?
Just,
I think Matt is too.
Matt, Brendan. Matt. Brendan's the biggest jock of all. Are you kidding me? He exercises like every single day.
Every day? I don't even do that.
Yeah, he used to do a lot of exercise. I don't know if he's still keeping up with it.
Wow,
I bet he is.
Not gonna mess with Brendan.
Yeah, no, Brendan is secretly like the strongest, healthiest person on the show. He could kill all of us with his bare hands, probably.
But
it's a good thing he's nice.
Go that far.
We'll need him in the class war then.
No, we definitely will. So, speaking of the class war, should we do this clip from Fox and Friends?
Oh, let's do it.
So I don't actually have this one on
which
my
which
sound
one
sheet.
is it? Because I never know which Fox clip Sam does in the morning, so I'll leave it to you guys.
This is the one regarding Michael Moore and Hollywood liberals and defunding the police. And how they don't really speak to real Americans. So don't forget about flyover country.
So basically, this clip checks all the boxes for what Fox News know will be incredibly powerful to their audience, and they'll twiddle them in their fingers right there, right in the palm of their hands. They're holding their audience captive with a clip like this.
Yeah, let's watch the masters at work.
Not everyone thinks like Hollywood. I mean, even so many more. I feel like there's so many more middle of the road Democrats. I mean, Hollywood and New York, yeah, they're progressive. That's how they feel. That's how Michael Moore feels. But look at South Carolina. The Democrats in South Carolina are saying that they're losing House seats nationally because these progressives are going in and saying defund the police. Well, South Carolinians don't want that. The majority of them don't. They need to look at this by state basis and see what the rest of the world looks like, or the rest of the country looks like. There are all these states in between, the flyover states, and they feel strongly about police officers and supporting.
Wait, pause it. Like they realize where Michael Moore is from, right? Like it is. Right. One of the worst examples. Michael Moore is from Michigan and was one of the biggest voices when, in the mainstream talking about the water crisis there. And I mean,
yeah, he predicted
trying to paint him
Trump
as
was going to win. He was like the only liberal in the media who figured that out.
They're painting him as the elitist, like that guy.
When I see Michael Moore, I think old Hollywood, James Dean.
I mean, she couldn't be further off of her examples here. As Emma said, like South Carolina is not a flyover; that's a coastal state. If we want to talk about defunding the police and stuff, well, let's go right down the middle of the country. As you mentioned, Michigan and Rashida Tlaib also there. Ilhan Omar had a lot of success in Minneapolis. There's another one, Missouri. Okay, Cory Bush just won in Missouri. That's, guess what, a flyover. If there's a state flew over more than Missouri. I wonder what it is. And then also, even further south, right in the middle of the country, you have Austin, Texas, which has probably gone farther on the municipal level on defunding the police than any other city in the country. So I think the middle of the country is actually spoken.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not really flyover country. I think the real issue is there's a certain Dixie land persisting in certain areas that we might need to, that gets a veto.
It's the romanticism of like a very specific culture in the center of the country that Fox in their Manhattan studio is pretending they care about.
Word.
Right,
Is there
but
more?
This should be the like sort of the ball, like the play here. Like everyone should be able to see right through this, watching this Fox News clip, all the centrist Democrats, the moderates, they should be able to see. Why would Fox News care that the defund the police rhetoric caused Democrats in real America to lose? I mean, why would they complain about that?
I've been helping Democrats.
Yeah, just sit back and let it happen, guys.
Right,
that's what I do.
This is extremely your shit. You love it.
They should like tell those Democrats shitting on the left about this rhetoric everything they need to know. Fox News is complaining about it because it's not true. If defund the police caused massive Democratic losses, Fox News wouldn't be saying what they're saying. They wouldn't be saying, oh, they should, Democrats really should turn away from this sort of stuff. No, they would just sit back and watch it happen, like you guys just mentioned.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
there's your, there's the messaging from this clip. If you ask me, that
is there more to the clip though? Did they say anything else?
We can finish it out here.
Okay, cool.
States in between, the flyover states, and they feel strongly about police officers and supporting our military and the people that protect our families.
No question. And
look at that Hollywood depraved weirdo liberal decadent man, fancy man.
Yeah, I mean,
his trucker hat.
A reminder that Ainsley Earhart is dating Sean Hannity, so it's really disgusting to think about.
Gross.
I was just going to say, speaking of Sean Hannity, and as you're going to say, Jamie, Cory Bush, we have another clip that we should maybe tack on here, which is Karl Rove on Sean Hannity. And I guess our opposition, I think Karl Rove's one of the more nefarious guys of the last, generation. They're not really up to speed on the left threat. Here's Karl and Sean Hannity talking about Cory Bush.
Where people who are naturally conservative say, is there a place in your party for somebody who looks and thinks like me? And suddenly they say, wait a minute, there is. So that is a big, important benefit to us.
And Cory Bush, I think he's from St. Louis, but I mean, your sentiment.
No, different. This is Cory Bush, who's a woman. I believe that she's from Baltimore.
Oh, I didn't know there were two. Okay.
Multiple. That sounds.
So first he thought Cory Bush was a man
from St. Louis.
From St. Louis, right? Then this one.
And then Rove thought he was a woman from Baltimore.
See, this is
so
why
both
they
half
were.
Right.
This is why they were so confused in the last clip. They don't know that Cory Bush is from Missouri.
Honestly, to me, the more cutting commentary there wasn't so much the Rove thinking Cory Bush is from Baltimore, and Hannity thinking Cory Bush was a man. It was that Sean Hannity didn't know that it was more than two. I mean, that sounded very weird, honestly. Like there's more than two black women running for, or more than two black
I wasn't
people
quite sure
in general.
What he meant by that. Because there's not more. There's not two Cory Bushes we're talking about. What does he mean?
I
by
don't
more
think
than...
so. I don't know of a
There's
second.
not even two Corys. There's not even two Corys.
Right.
Like, who is he? That says a lot.
Well, do we know who he confused her with?
I don't. Who's from Baltimore that ran?
I think he just assumed that the black lady he saw on television who was talking in a progressive tone was from Baltimore.
Unless he thought Cory Bush was Jamal Bowman. I mean,
who's also not from Baltimore.
Right. But that wasn't Hannity's mistake. That was Rove's. I'm going to assume Rove thought that Cory Bush was that one black Republican who was running in Baltimore who got all that press coverage for her ads. Do you remember that woman?
I mean, the point is just that they don't delineate between Black people and think they're all from cities and think they're all radical and want to paint a specific picture. I mean, who knows what they were even thinking.
I also love the laziness where, like, Hannity's like, Cori Bush is a Black guy from Baltimore. Thank you for correcting me. Now that we've corrected that fact, let's move on to commercial.
Right.
I'm surprised someone didn't come and chime in. I'm sorry. I think you're all thinking of the senator from South Carolina. I mean,
it just goes to show you just like the utter lack of respect that they have for people like her. Because if you know anything at all about Cori Bush, you know that she came out of Ferguson and you know that she came out of the Black Lives Matter movement. That is her defining characteristic as a politician. And if you can't even be bothered to take 10 seconds to Google her, like, I mean, I'm not surprised. It's just disgusting to see it over and over again manifesting itself.
I'm almost relieved because, like, that I would think that these guys would be really keyed in on Ferguson activists becoming a candidate, and if they're a little bit behind on that, all the better as far as I'm concerned.
And low energy these days.
Like, they pretend, so in the clip before, they talk about flyover states and the elite liberals, right? That they don't care about them. They don't care about the working class. But it's really just a culture, because there has never been a more working class, like, actually representing the people candidate and now Congresswoman than Cori Bush. I mean, she exemplifies that exact philosophy and, like, something that's incredibly aspirational. But they dismiss her because she's a Black working class woman or someone who came from that background. But if you're a white farmer in Iowa, let's fetishize that to our 85-year-old geriatric viewers.
Yeah, it's almost like working class is really just a dog whistle in their mouths
to
mean white people, because a lot of the time they're also talking to, like, small business owners and people who are not technically part of the working class but identify culturally. And it's just one more example of how the media in general, but especially Fox News, mystifies these categories and hides what's actually going on for people.
The unfortunate thing, though, it seems like Fox News and the right has successfully co-opted the term working class. If you guys remember, just a few days ago, when Bernie Sanders went on cable news and spoke about how the Democrats have to continue their reach out to the working class, all these moderates and centrists started yelling at him on Twitter for prioritizing white people. When he never even said that at all.
We just have to ignore those people, honestly. Like, they don't know what they're talking about. They take up a lot of air in the room. They're a bunch of stupid assholes. But, like, most normal people do not care what they think in the first place.
And I just want to make a quick point on, like, the Democrats and if they should listen to the advice from Fox and Friends and these centrists just as a matter of gaining power. Because the fact of the matter is, from a cynical perspective, if I'm a Democrat in leadership, I'm saying, all we had to do to get a huge spike in voter registration this summer was have Nancy Pelosi and Drew wear a kente cloth, because they're not really doing a whole lot, but it is benefiting them. I don't see a whole lot of evidence that it hurt them a lot. I do see evidence that voter registration spiked for a party that really isn't addressing fundamentally what the activists want. And so, like, the party, if I was a Democrat, I'd continue doing the kente cloth thing, because guess what? People are turning out for you, and you're not really even having to challenge stuff. The challenges are really, like we said, coming from the municipal level, like the Austin.
Well, they are and they aren't, right? Because the share of Black electorate in some Rust Belt states, for example, turnout was still up numerically, but white turnout was up more. So the share of Black voters in the electorate fell. And it probably would have been even lower if it weren't for the efforts of a lot of Black-led groups doing grassroots organizing on the ground, some of whom do support defunding the police. So all these people who are saying that defund is toxic for the Democrats, they really don't have a leg to stand on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm looking at Minnesota. Ilhan's district did fine. The Republicans won a lot of state Senate seats, though, in other areas because the party's just weak and it's not trying to win every state.
Yeah. And they're losing. I mean, it's not that many people right now, but it is concerning that some people of color, some Black voters and some Hispanic voters are going over to the side of the Republicans. like all I've been saying all of this time and all that Brianna Joy Gray has been saying, I think she's been misconstrued sometimes, is that the Democrats need to offer something to the Black working class. The Democrats need to be offering something to the working class in general if they want them to keep on coming out for them, and they can't just take their votes for granted.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that's nothing that I ever disagreed with about Bria's. I disagreed about the I can't even say it now, abstention strategy. But like, that's the part I was specifically disagreeing with. But I agree 100%.
Which is why Nancy Pelosi needs to send a carton of that wonderful ice cream to every voter, and the Democrats will be good. Let's go to the calls again, and who do we got here? Let's see. 920. What's your name? Where you calling from?
Hello, this is Joe from Wisconsin.
Hi, Joe from Wisconsin. What would you like to talk about today?
Well, first I was curious if you are the Matt Binder that has the Zardos doodle on Thought Slime.
No. What? Huh?
Oh.
What?
Maybe I missed.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Might
I'm
just
sorry.
be a person with the same name. In the credits to a YouTuber, Thought Slime, he does doodles.
It's the Matt Binder from Baltimore.
Patreon. Oh, okay. The actual question, though, is I've noticed family members and coworkers. You were talking about, now I forget what it's called. My brain's escaping. The Facebook and Twitter alternative for the right wing starts with a P.
Parler?
Crap.
Parler?
Parler, yeah. I've noticed a bunch of former coworkers in the care field and family members like talking about like, oh, our voices are being silenced on these, and we're going over to that. Do you think that there's a real worry of, not having those restraints extending the echo chamber effect, or do you think that those platforms are kind of doomed and small enough that it's not really that much of a worry?
Right. It's a good thing that this stuff is not on site. Well, when I say this stuff, let me be more accurate. It's a good thing that rampant misinformation, harmful conspiracy theories, hate speech, threats, things of that nature are not on the major social networks like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. No matter where some of these people go, the fact remains is that they will never have the same reach that they have if they were saying this type of stuff on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I mean, even if, I think the numbers right now, Parler is claiming that they have about 5 million users, give or take, right now. Compare that to the 2.6 billion users that Facebook has, the 360 some odd million users that Twitter has. I mean, we're just talking about the spread of this stuff. It's just a net positive that your friends who aren't yet in this world there'll be less of a chance that they'll find this stuff and possibly fall down the rabbit hole themselves. Now, that's the good thing. Now, once we deal with these sort of problems on these big major platforms, we can sort of, I guess, pay more attention to the Parlers and the MeWe's and the BitChutes, because they are creating an echo chamber, and it's not good. But at the same time, these sites have a really bad track record. Very rarely have any of these niche social networks ever been successful. You see Parler is having its moment now, but it also had its moment a couple months ago during the summer. In May and June, the site received a ton of new users. I believe like a couple million of those 5 million came during that time frame. And basically what happened was, and I think it was Will Sommer of the Daily Beast was the first one to really dive in like a month or two later. He went in, checked out Parler in July and August to see if some of those big personalities who were ranting and raving about leaving Twitter and moving to Parler were still using it. And I think Benny Johnson is using it again, but He joined in June saying he was never going to use Twitter again. And by July, he stopped posting on Parler altogether. So it took him less than a month to give up on Parler, and he was still tweeting on Twitter the entire time. A Blaze TV host had a similar. She goes by like her name is like conservative, or I'm sorry, Millennial Millie or something like that. She was another one of those people who jumped over there. Jason Miller, one of Donald Trump's own advisors, was talking it up over the summer, and he posted once in July, once in August, and he hasn't been there since, not even for the election. So these social networks will, they're certainly, I think Parler right now is the #1 free app in the App Store, and has been that way for a few days now.
No way, really?
Yeah. And MeWe was #2, and then it got bumped to #3 by Newsmax. So basically the top 3 apps, free apps in Apple's App Store are all conservative social networks and media. There is a sizable portion of the country that wants this stuff. But the thing is, when you go there and, your friends and family who aren't also there you don't see that, you're going to engage less on there. And then eventually you're just not you're be bored of the platform. I mean, Parler is literally just all conservative politics. Like, that's the whole website. I mean, say what you will about Facebook and how it's right wing. There's still a sizable portion of like your family on there posting pictures of babies and what you're doing for Thanksgiving and things like that. And that keeps you engaged and on there and wanting to keep logging in so you could keep in touch with that cousin from across the country or whatever. That's not on Parler. There's none of that on Parler. How much can you possibly revolve your whole life around conservative politics, especially when it's the conservative politics that get you banned from places like Facebook and Twitter? Like, how much can your life revolve around QAnon conspiracy theories and anti-vaccination misinformation? I mean, there is obviously a quite sizable portion of those people, but is it enough to sustain those social networks? I doubt it. I don't think so.
All right. Yeah, no, I mean, you should write a book on this, Bender.
Oh, why? Thank you. Wow, that was.
Yeah,
I'm flattered, Emma. Thank you.
You know a lot more about these like QAnon dark corners of the web than I think a lot of people, and you're passionate. So that's really the #1 step.
Yeah, willing to go there with your time, I think, is key.
The guidance counselor has logged on.
That's all. That's.
I'm always a little bit. I was really flattered until you said the word. I think what was it? You said something like, "I admire your passion." That's always the phrase on Twitter when you want to tell someone to shut up.
No, it's not. I just don't have anything to add because you know so much more about like Q and these like social networking things that I'm just oblivious.
Right. I mean, there aren't enough people. Like, again, 5 million people can certainly have their lives consumed by this stuff, but can you build a sustainable social network based on that 5 million people? I mean, listen, if they pull it off and get these people to pay them subscription-wise, like pay them money to keep them going, they definitely will be around for a long time, regardless of whether they could grow their user base. But if they can't find a way to monetize their content, I mean, not many companies out there are going to run ads on a social network that's just people believing that Democrats are eating babies and Hollywood elites are running underground pedophile rings.
Yeah, I'm starting to suspect that you're Q yourself. I don't know if you've gotten that yet, but
how do you know so much about it?
Right, exactly. It's a little suspect.
Did you guys see when Tony Bobulinski tried to hint that he was Q, just to keep his grift, his very short?
That's the ultimate Trumper play, right? Like,
right.
That's the throne. If you could, and it's claimable, I think, too. It's already been claimed by several people, I think. Is that right? Like, Q's
there's
been
people who tried. There's been people who tried to hint at it. Yes,
but if you have like Trump admin clout, you can go grab that thing, I think.
Right. I mean, if that's the thing too, though. Like, Q hasn't been monetized at all, which means Q is clearly just as bad as a self-promoter as I am. So maybe I could be Q. Really. I mean, he's failing on the monetization level, just like I am.
No, because he's in it for the right reasons.
I was listening to the. the QAnon
He's
Anonymous.
trying to stop people from eating babies. Try and keep up.
I was listening to the QAnon Anonymous podcast, and there are several like long running podcasts that they monitor that are pro Q have been like, like actually wondering if they were misled at this moment. And it's I don't know, we'll see how long as Trump tries to say he's still president if the numbers get up, but 3% from the first poll I saw said he was actually still president, which is that, like, if Q is going to do anything as a movement, like, you got to get those numbers up.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Like, so it's almost 80% of Americans think Biden won the election. 15% say the results are still in question. And then 3% think Trump won. 3%. I mean, that's the audience, like what you just said, Matt. That's the audience that he's appealing to right now. It's a very small portion, but then I saw another poll that showed that 70% of the Republicans think the election is in question. So there's some variance there, but that kernel of just 3% of people who think Trump won, like, that's not enough for him to sustain this, very weak coup attempt.
Right, but I do want to add there that, because 3% sounds small if you're just saying 3%, but remember 3% equals millions and millions and millions of people, which obviously it's not enough to sustain a coup attempt, but is it large enough to try to take over the party a la the Tea Party in 2010? I think it's in a better place than the Tea Party ever was, to be quite honest with you.
No, I'm not downplaying the threat. I'm just saying, like, that that is the core. That is exactly what you're talking about here.
Like, you literally have elected officials, and I'm not talking like just state reps and local officials. Like, you have senators and congressmen in the Republican Party out there saying that you have Pompeo out there saying there's a Trump administration coming next year. I mean, this is where the party is going. And I even saw some people say, online, I was like, the threat is over. And in regards to Trump, this was specifically in regards to the rumors going around that Trump is talking about running in 2024, that the Republican Party will never make that same mistake again. What mistake? What mistake? The Republican Party under Trump was the most successful they've ever been. Trump got more votes than any Republican presidential candidate in history. If anything, Trump wasn't a mistake. Trump is the smartest thing the Republican Party has ever done for itself.
Yeah, he did the tax cuts. He did what they wanted. He actually got a lot of what they wanted done. So yeah, I don't see how it's a mistake. I do think this movement is going to be looking for a new head for a little while, because that's how this works. It's always a combination of, larger social forces and contingencies like Trump and his very specific cult of personality. But at the end of the day, he was pretty much just a Republican on steroids, right? Like,
but that's what you need.
He did not have a violent street movement. He did not have that real populist grassroots element behind him. People interacted and engaged with him like they engage with all politics in the society of the spectacle, which is to say, as consumers, not active participants.
I would just say, like, he's a Republican on steroids, but that's what Republicans need to win, I think, general elections. I mean, this is my prediction, right? Like, I don't think they're going to be able... I was watching the Daily Wire's response to him losing, and, Ben Shapiro's like, I think he should stop talking about it being stolen. Everyone else is like, shut up, you nerd. But, like, they literally talk about him as a great man of history. And I actually think, like... And you talk about these margins among certain communities going up for Trump. Like, I want to see the GOP do that without Trump, because I think he's a unique thing. I mean, he's not. This is why the Republicans had to go to Reagan, a movie star, right? Like, that's why he had success. I don't think like normal lifer Republicans are can do this. I think they can find somebody outside it, but it's not going to be Tom Cotton. It's not going to be Josh Hawley. It's going to be some sort of celebrity, probably.
Well, I mean, they are. This is the facts over feelings crowd, but they're more susceptible to like big personalities and kind of actors in politics who are charismatic in their own way. I mean, denying Trump's charisma, I think, is silly and often a result of just liberal hysteria, because Trump is very much a effective communicator and somebody who expresses these complex issues in a very distilled way that people find amusing. I mean, the fact that he's funny, that is so underplayed and underrepresented, not talked about enough by libs. And
you hear that, Matt Binder?
No, I never said he wasn't not
he's hilarious.
Funny.
He's hilarious.
I said he's not purposely like coming up with this stuff.
We
like
had
he's just naturally like this.
Spirited back and forth as to whether or not Trump.
I have this debate with my old colleague John Iderola, who doesn't think he's funny at all. Like, you're missing it.
We should get John on
this, Emma.
We should get John on. But John shows from 1 to 2, so he's right smack dab in the middle of this. But
I said Trump is funny, but he's not purposefully funny. Like, he's not going up there saying, "Oh, they're gonna think this is hilarious." Like, it's just his natural persona says these things because he actually thinks them. But it's just funny when he says them, and it's funny how he delivers it. I never said he wasn't funny. I said he's not purposely up there saying, "Oh, this is going to get them. This is going to be the great, like, I'm going to really knock it out of the park with this line."
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying he's like Richard Pryor, but I'm saying that, like, as a human being, he is like a cartoonish person. I mean, it's almost like he's barely human, and everything contributes to that. His weird ass hairstyle, his unnaturally orange skin, the fact that he pastes his name everywhere, like he's a different kind of being. And I feel like, you know, that they're gonna have to be drawn to someone like that, as Matt said, you know, going down the line.
But I think Trump is the Republicans' Obama. Like, their once in a lifetime candidate. I mean, I know Biden now has more vote total than any president and more than Obama, but Obama did it because of Obama got those votes because of Obama. People went out and voted for Obama. Biden got these votes because it was the anti-Trump vote. No one's clamoring for, well, there are, but not that many people are clamoring for Joe Biden. Certainly not 75 million, wherever it's going to end up being. People
certainly not volunteering for him either.
Right. So the idea that, so Biden aside, like, Trump is, like, Obama could have beat Trump easily, like, no doubt about it. But But Trump has basically given Republicans their Obama. So just like Democrats are screwed and have been screwed since losing, Obama, in terms of at least the national race, Republicans will be screwed when they lose Trump. Although I do think the Republicans have a much larger bench of people who can possibly turn into Trump.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like the Democrats just had no I think Obama should have been able to cultivate some like successor, and it's amazing that it's Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden that had to follow him. I mean, that's right. We talk about like Evo Morales and him holding on to power by running in elections, longer than that people think he should have, like, as if it is a perpetual issue to train the next generation. But like, when you have the leadership of the Democrats, like Pelosi's 80, Steny Hoyer's 80, Schumer's 80, one of them's 81, I think, like, and we're running these decrepit like neoliberals from the 70s and 80s, like, it's I don't know. It's very strange why I have this tweet. I shared it earlier where Kevin McCarthy's just basically welcoming the QAnon caucus. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy gets asked about QAnon supporters Marjorie Taylor Greene and Laurie Boebert, who are both elected to the House GOP. Our party is very diverse, so there's some intellectual diversity. Oh my God. He says both have denounced QAnon, which is not true.
Yeah,
he's also said, I saw in a separate tweet that he also said that, they haven't even joined Congress yet. We have to let's everyone give them a chance. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene, actually, I think she might be the only Republican who is beating Trump in getting those like misinformation labels on Twitter. I actually wrote a story about it. Trump, from the election, Trump had maybe 8 or 9 of those labels of and for Twitter to put this on, you have to overtly put out just absolute bullshit about the election, specifically trying to sway people into thinking something completely opposite from reality. So, Trump had 8 or 9 over a couple of days. They had to hit Marjorie Taylor Greene with 19 of those labels in one day. So, I mean, I think we've already given her the benefit of the doubt as much as we could, and it's time to start.
Matt Binder doesn't believe in redemption.
Right.
Look at
Right. That's the story, the intolerant left.
Exactly.
Well, speaking of Bolivia.
Right. There we go. Smooth transition. Good job.
So thank you. Thank you. So here's a somewhat uplifting story to balance out all of the depressing things we have been talking about. Evo Morales has returned to Bolivia after a year-long exile in Argentina following a military coup by the far right of his country, which was, subsequently supported by the U.S., of course, and following a subsequent victory, or I should say second victory, of the MAS party, which is the party that Evo Morales was a part of. So,
and Jamie, what does MAS stand for the folks?
Oh my God, I'm gonna get this wrong.
It's movement, isn't it? Movimiento Socialismo.
Yes.
Movement towards socialism, I believe.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That sounds right.
So you can see why.
Socialismo.
And it also is Spanish for more.
Oh, also true, yeah. And so you can see why they might be targets of imperial powers. But here's this video here.
I thought it's for many awesome socialists.
It stands for many things. So we've got people.
And also, we should say follow Ollie Vargas, O Vargas 52, and Kawasha News. They have been getting hit with these misinformation things too from Twitter, because Twitter buys into the logic that if you're going to crack down on misinformation from the right, you have to attack the left as well. And so they haven't been banned from Twitter, but they get these warnings, and frankly, it should be warning like the content's too good.
I have to look into those warnings because they're actually very different from the misinformation ones. So I'm not sure what's going on there. It basically says the warnings that Ollie's been getting. And by the way, I had him on 2 weeks ago on Doomed, my podcast. So go check that out. YouTube.com/Matt Binder for the video, or doomedpod.com for the podcast. The ones that he's been getting say something like, we're noticing suspicious activity from this account, which is different than the other one. So I'm not sure what's going on there.
If there should be anyway, but we didn't. Sorry, we didn't say that that's the video of the reaction to Morales returning to the country.
That's right. And
yes.
For anyone who is listening and not watching, the people are saying, we're back in power. Now there's millions more of us, even more than the first time, as they greet their leader, their figurehead of this movement, back into his home country of Bolivia after he crossed the bridge over the border on foot, like a real G. Keeping it real.
The problem is that MAS hasn't done the focus grouping on rural Bolivia, where they don't really respond to socialism. That's the real issue here. I mean, there needs to be more.
I heard that the defund the police. I heard defund the police. The slogan cost Morales the election, or caused the coup. I don't know.
Morales is like, this is not the time to be making maximalist demands.
I mean, he did. Okay. I don't want to complicate things too much, but a lot of his working class base was kind of pissed off when he asked them to calm down with the strikes and the blockades and the protests, because it was starting to alienate the middle class, which he also needed to vote for him. But, even the people who were pissed off at him still supported him and wanted to see his party succeed, because it was never just about him. And that's what we can learn from the movement in Bolivia, right? We're talking about Obama, we're talking about Trump. Unless you have a real movement behind you, these things are doomed to remain ephemeral. Like, why was Evo Morales able to transfer his leadership to a successor who was then able to run as the figurehead of the MAS party and win? It's because it really was not me, us, right? It was a huge social movement, which only one of the things it does is supports electoral campaigns, right? They also have a huge organized labor movement. They have a huge activated working class base that is able to exert independent power, even in a relatively poor and under-resourced country like Bolivia. So I think we have a lot to learn from them.
And also, I think what's important to talk about too is how they exemplify the intersectionality between working class conditions and race, and just how that is not part of the discussion enough in the United States. But of course, Morales, an indigenous leader, and a lot of his support being working class indigenous folks, like it also just goes to show when you're kind of able to tie those things together and be smart about it politically and understand the bigger picture there, you can be successful.
Yeah, I want to...
Also, though, it speaks to the importance of who you put in power in your administration, because I didn't know this until Ali told me. But Luis Arce, the president of Bolivia now, he wasn't just some senator in Bolivia or something that Evo had to convince people to like. He was actually the minister of economy for the entirety of Morales's presidency. So this was a guy who basically was in charge of pulling all the impoverished and those in poverty in Bolivia out of that situation. As we all know, Evo Morales was able to really bring Bolivia out of a really tough situation as president. And, the poor there were experiencing, growth in their own wealth. And so this is a guy who had he had a finger on that. So, it's important to also make sure you're in your own presidency, you're putting people in your cabinet who possibly can take the reins of the party in the future.
Yeah, and I would also point out this episode of the Red Nation podcast. Nick Estes talks with Camila Escalante of Kawishan News, one of Ollie's partners, who's also working with Ollie. And I think it is, you talk about, there was a lot of protests during Bolivia's, as Jamie kind of alluded to, during his administrations. The point that they make in this Red Nation thing is I think the left that turned on Evo, I think prematurely. I think the perspective that I think Nick points out is Bolivia was under imperial rule for centuries and centuries. And one person and one administration isn't going to actually be able to undo that. The only thing you can do is start to cultivate where you want to go in the future. And I think Bolivia, I think Evo has done a tremendous job at that, and that's why he was such a threat.
Yeah, right. just to put a button on it with the Twitter warning labels, I think if anyone deserves one of those warning labels, it's the New York Times that tweeted, right? Bolivia's former president, Evo Morales, returned to the country on Monday, a year after his failed attempt to keep power tore the nation apart and sent him into exile.
It's incredible that they got dragged for their initial reporting on this. Then in June, it came out that it was the OAS audit that was wrong, not the results of the election. They corrected themselves. And then now that we're seeing just a complete vindication of what the left was saying, they continue to double down on that framing. I mean, it's almost, and maybe I'm reading way too much into it, but it almost seems kind of retaliatory and smug and... Oh,
it's justifying the OAS stuff. That's what it is. Right. It's saying because Evo was so persistent in running for office, we can do stuff like the OAS stuff. That's look what you made me do. That's like the Taylor Swift song, right? That's the reactionary anthem. Look what you made me do by continuing to by running in an election we didn't want you to run in.
Yeah,
I mean that's what Yasha Monk's talking about. That's what the New York Times really means too.
And also really to stress here, what the OAS's problem with how the votes came in, what they thought was fraudulent or sketchy back when Morales was reelected last year. The same exact thing happened in the U.S. elections this year, where votes came in later than the night of the election, which added larger totals to one candidate than the other due to the location of the people who voted. In Morales's case, he's very popular in rural areas where there's more indigenous people, and they are big fans of Morales for many reasons. One of them being obviously his economic policies, another being that he's the first ever indigenous president of Bolivia. So, they went for Morales, and those votes pushed him over the edge, but they came in late. They didn't come in right away. Where was the OAS for the U.S. election when all those votes came in for Biden, due to the fact that mail-in voting takes more time to count, takes longer to get to the...
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing, but of course...
And make no mistake, the OAS is every bit of conscious of that dynamic as Trump and the Republicans are of it in this country. There's zero chance that the OAS doesn't know that's the way those ballots come in, because guess what? An analysts and in the moment, we're telling you that's exactly what's going to happen with these ballots. Like, there's probably no fraud.
So, like, the disconnect of libs in this country kind of going after Trump for this and then embracing what the OAS said is just a complete cognitive dissonance. And it's at best ignorance, and at worst, it's deliberately disingenuous.
Right, David Pakman. Okay, let's move on to the next. Let's move on to the next call. Let's go to 570. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, this is Dave from Scranton.
Hey, Dave from Scranton. What would you like to talk about today?
First off, happy 10-year anniversary to Sam and the rest of the crew. But, I actually wrote this down before the election. I really think the left has lost social media and the internet. And I'm not just talking about Democratic candidates who didn't spend enough money on Facebook. But you've seen the numbers of views and clicks right-wingers get, whether it's YouTube or Facebook. Right-wing hacks that promote known lies and debunk stories. I mean, Steven Crowder, who is now passing TYT in subs and views, his Rudy Giuliani Hunter Biden video received almost 1 million views very, very quickly. Even far lesser known right-wingers get over 100K views, 100,000 views on YouTube. And plus now we also have to deal with, these dumb grifters who say they're on the left, yet they only attack Dems and progressives, Dorr, me, Crystal Ball, Greenwald. Destiny, who's a centrist, who has bad takes, is doing a better job of taking down the right wing than these so-called leftists.
Well, yeah,
First of all, Glenn doesn't call himself a leftist. I mean, he's
a
journalist with certain interests. But, look, this has always been the case. We've never been winning the social media. And the fact is, it's because, one, there's a lot of right-wing media in this country has been a product for a long time. We're seeing a generation of people whose parents were all Limbaugh folks, I think.
And also the funding
is... What could we do?
I mean,
what could we do to fix this?
It's going to be a trickle because, first, basically advertisers and people who are currently investing a ton of money in cable news have to catch on to the fact that most millennials are consuming their news on the internet. But there is a significant uphill battle now with just the funding gap, because right-wingers like Crowder or Dave Rubin or all of these people who really are not very talented and don't have anything good to say, they have the infrastructure that the left can't. Because there will constantly be money.
Also, I do wonder.
Right, they don't have to turn a profit. Their profit is to spread these ideas.
Exactly. That's the exact right point. And I don't know if I have the answer, to be honest with you.
No, that's a really good point. But I do wonder, though. I wonder how effective the idea that, because the right does this a lot in their media, where they are right-wing media. The Ben Shapiro's and even the Mike Cernoviches, the further, the people who are even further right than Ben Shapiro, or at least further conspiratorial and grifter, more of a grifter than Shapiro even. But all those guys consider themselves conservative media, Daily Wire, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas they've also successfully sort of painted CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, and all this other mainstream media as the left alternative to them. So I do wonder,
which is not true.
It's not true at all. Absolutely not true. So I do wonder if that sort of framing of things has been successful over all these years in terms of just making people not go out and seek leftist media, real leftist media, because they just don't know it exists, or they think they are getting leftist media from those mainstream media sources that I just mentioned. I do wonder if that plays a role in it. It certainly plays some sort of dynamic.
Right. Just one more quick question. Do you think a lot of these right-wingers get all these views because, people like trolls? They like people who just troll other people? Or do they actually believe in these right-wing agenda? and ideas. Sounded like Ruben there for a second, but
who are you talking about specifically, or who do you have in mind?
How how Crowder gets all these views? Do people watch him because he's a troll? I mean, how many of these people actually believe in it or vote?
I mean, look, the advantage conservatives have is the only thing they need to get to is an argument that allows you to be a psychopath and can check out of caring about a certain argument. And that's frankly not difficult to do, right? All you have to do is say people are overreacting about this or that, or it's not really a problem. And then you're done. And frankly, there's a lot of people motivated to consume that kind of content because it is nice to think that people are overreacting about all this stuff.
It's the cozy blanket of cynicism.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also just more gratifying to the lizard parts of your brain to see a conservative dunking on people that you don't like, or saying we're going to stop the pedophiles, or something that really hits in the id, in the less thinking part of a person's brain, versus you watch a show like this one or Democracy Now! Or any kind of left alternative media, and you don't have people offering you easy answers. A lot of the time you have people who disagree. They don't just say, well, here's how we get from here to a better world. You just have to listen to everything I say, do this, this, and this. There's not that comforting blanket, because the world as it actually is confusing. And not everybody agrees on, scholars don't even agree on a common definition of fascism, right? There's so much complexity, and for some people that is a draw, and for other people who have been trained to only interact with politics and media as consumers do, it is a huge turnoff.
Also, it's the content too, though, if you think about it, because when you talk about leftist media, you're usually talking about content that provides policy analysis and discussion of actual politics, whereas at least the examples you gave, like Crowder, these right-wing channels are just talking about cultural issues for the most part, which
Jesse Smollett.
Yeah. Well, cultural issues completely.
Well, even Jimmy Dore, though, his whole thing is that both parties are the same, and he says this. He's been saying the same wrong talking points from 2016, even today.
Well, yeah,
and he has no answers.
He's committed to that. I think people. First of all, Jimmy Dore is in the rearview mirror, folks. He's been stagnant, apart from a few Tulsi Gabbard appearances, for a while now. So I think we frankly care too much. He has his dead enders, and they're going to dead end.
Yeah.
What the left has an advantage of is for things like decommodifying healthcare, that's always going to be the right thing, regardless of which channel you find that on. And I think that's broadly true of a lot of issues. We really, though, need to cultivate space for people to have time to engage these issues, and massive work weeks, and that sort of stuff. Those sort of structural issues are the only way we can combat this. And taking some of the oomph out of right-wing corporations that fund this stuff might be useful too, if we can find regulatory things like that. But it's tough because you can't go back to the fairness doctrine. I don't know how you could really institute something like that. So
we need some.
Thank you.
Thank you for calling.
We need some angles to fund our alternative media operation.
Right. Yes.
I would like Jimmy Dore to come on this show and just argue Tulsi Gabbard over Ilhan Omar.
I don't even.
When's the last time he was on the show? Was that during Russiagate stuff?
What?
Wasn't Jimmy Dore? When was the last time Jimmy Dore was on the Majority Report?
Oh, the last time that him and Sam had a debate where he said that Trump won't stack the Supreme Court if he wins.
He's not a good guy. He's not.
Yeah, he's a fool.
Yeah,
I understand he's a dumbass in a very specific way that really provokes Sam to no end, but I feel like he just doesn't matter that much. And maybe
what he represents matters, I think. What he represents, and that he's a great picture of that kind of leftist. I think that's intoxicating for a lot of people who want to get caught up in personalities and want to feel this guttural hatred, this visceral thing for politics.
Look, Rising is the refined version of Jimmy Dore.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true.
Jimmy Dore is
at least they talk about policy a little. At least Crystal does talk about policy.
We'll say it, so you don't have to.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but Jimmy Dore is like the honestly, he's like the leader of what Michael called the dumb left now. Like he is the biggest personality. It's very small. It's not anywhere as big as like the conspiratorial corners of the right. I mean, they're all conspiratorial right now. There's no more corners, but he is sort of become the biggest personality among those people who say they're on the left, but also thought that Hillary Clinton popped Seth Rich. I mean, that's what it comes down. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. I mean,
I love the image of her with like a gun. Just
she would.
She might.
I will never shit on somebody for adopting a more radical politics that views electoral campaigns as basically useless, but there has to be an alternative presented there, and there has to be a coherent analysis. Otherwise, you are just demobilizing people.
Yeah. And there's no policy talk. Like
if he were mobilizing people to start a collective like angry workers did and organize their fellow members of the working class to someday take over the food supply or something like that, would be different than if he's just sitting there bitching about AOC and his alternative is Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, I mean, I think it poisons the well against radicalism to call the idea that the Democrats and GOP, there's no meaningful analytical distinction between those two groups, like a radical position. I think that's not analysis. Yeah. It's a rhetorical crutch. Who do those guys go to as their one real leftist politician when Tulsi's out of office in January? That's the interesting thing. I would love to monitor that.
Who's it going to be?
That's the same thing.
They're going to start arguing that Hakeem Jeffries is the real progressive.
but that's the thing with like the post left, right? Like all those people on Twitter which like criticize the left broadly. What would it actually look like for them to do a positive thing? And I don't mean positive in a moral sense. I mean like in the sense that Trump made Space Force. That's a positive thing he did in the world. What would Dore or what would the post left? What would them actually doing something look like that isn't just criticize the left or criticize the DNC? Like what would them doing something look like?
I mean, people call some of these folks Strasserists, which is not an accurate term because the Strasserites were literally Nazis with some socialist beliefs. And I think some of these post-left people are sort of socialist or social democrat with some reactionary beliefs, but whatever the word is for that. I mean,
you mentioned Hakeem Jeffries. Hold on, just really quick. Yeah, like sure. you mentioned Hakeem Jeffries. Like Dore wouldn't unite behind him because he's like probably like a little anti-black, to be honest with you. Like that's the vibe I get.
Yeah. So I think this actually brings us, unless you had something to say, Matt.
No, I was just going to say that it should also be mentioned that I do think that the post-left is a little bit different. Is a different cohort than the Jimmy Dore audience.
Yes, no, I agree. But I mean, the parallel I'm drawing is what would it look like for any of these people to do something?
All right. How would you guys describe? This is very online, actually, more online than I think I even talk about usually in terms of the post-left. For the majority part listener, I don't know if you guys ever discussed this before. How would you describe the post-left? Because I think a lot of people don't know what that is.
I feel like it's not even worth talking about because it's such a vocal minority, and these people don't do any organizing in real life. All they do is complain on Twitter and on YouTube or whatever about the things the actual leftists are doing.
Yeah, it's like an anti-woke left overheated about 3 times, I think, how I would describe it. And my first introduction to them is Michael had a writer who published something in one of their magazines on to discuss. And I can't remember what it was, but it was a decent piece. And it caused a schism in the editorial because one person thought we were too much of left lib cucks to actually talk to. Because fundamentally, being taken seriously is a bigger challenge to these people than being mocked on Twitter all the time. Because like I said, there's no productive agenda there. It's just in the post-left's case, it's what the left doing wrong. And in this Dore case, it's what the DNC's doing wrong. And guess what? Both those groups doing a lot wrong because neither is winning. But when you just bet on and make your brand on basically just capitalizing on that failure, that's what they're doing, right? They're just capitalizing on failure because guess what? Failure is a good thing to bet on in this world.
Mm-hmm. All All right, let's go back to. I guess we have time for like one more call, and then we'll read some IMs, and that's the show. Let's go to 847. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Josh from Chicago.
Hey, Josh from Chicago. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing great. What would you like to talk about today?
I wanted to. Did you guys talk about the Marco Rubio thing on Fox News, where he said that the vision for the Republican Party should be a multiracial, multi-ethnic, working-class party?
Thank you for bringing that up.
Hannity.
Yes, thank you. I did mean to mention that, but go ahead.
Well, it was very bizarre, and of course, he's full of shit, and I don't believe him.
Right.
But I do think the things that he's talking about, it's dangerous in the fact that I could see almost people in organized labor or the working class turning against organized labor based on how they sort of frame this stuff. And I just don't think the Democratic Party, I'm sorry, I'm going to shit on Nancy Pelosi, and I hope you're okay, Matt. But
that's okay.
I don't think the Democratic, okay, good. I know she's been climbing the show a lot, but I don't think the Democratic Party has an answer at all for what Rubio is talking about, and I don't know. I think
the Republicans are definitely more effective at strategizing, just in general, to be quite honest. So if they want to present themselves as that, I mean, I don't think they're suddenly going to become a party that's like the Democratic Party in terms of an overwhelming, number of Black and Latino and Asian support. But we've seen Trump run those numbers up, and I can certainly see them at least being more competitive in the future with Blacks, Latinos, Asians, and other minority groups.
My counterpoint would be, Josh, do you think that he'll be able to do both, improve margins among those communities and turn out the white supremacist vote too, to create such a massive turnout? Because I think if the Republicans go too far in this Rubio direction, they're going to sacrifice a lot of that MAGA turnout.
Trump did it though. I know he lost some.
I think he did it. I think it's nationalism though. I think it's nationalism, and nationalism to even certain minority groups is a hell of a drug for people.
That's a great point. That's a really good point.
I think if they can shift the emphasis from white supremacy to a less ethnic kind of nationalism, and offer some kind of material solution to the problems of deindustrialization, globalization, even if it's a huge lie, I think they have potential to make the inroads. But like we've seen with, the recent split among the Proud Boys, not everybody wants to make that transition and be welcoming to minorities who are U.S. citizens.
That wasn't legit. Don't be fooled by the stuff you saw, Jamie. That guy who's those chats that leaked from Proud Boys trying to turn them into the Goy Boy. I forgot exactly what it was, but that guy hasn't been. Yeah, the Proud Boys. He hasn't been associated with the Proud Boys for some time. He was. It's the media not quite understanding how these groups work.
Well, that's why we have you.
Yeah, you know.
I mean, neither party is going to be a party that represents working class interests. They both have working class people voting for them in ways that are rather divorced from any political outcome that's going to happen. I think maybe sometimes we undersell the role of economic anxiety in people going for the GOP. Certainly when you look at non-white people who are voting for the GOP, obviously there's something else going on there. I mean, part of it is probably that whiteness is a historically malleable category, and more Hispanics identify as white than people realize. And, once you've been in this country for a while, you kind of join the hegemonic group, the hegemonic grouping there. But there's so much going on. I was listening to Trillbillies the other night, and the narrative of economic anxiety driving people to vote for Trump was I didn't even believe it, but I don't think the polls really capture all of it. Like Terrence from Trillbillies was talking about this woman in the doctor's office who was like the receptionist, and she was scared. She was sad and she was scared that Trump lost because she's like, my husband is a coal miner. What's going to happen to us? And people on both sides, and people on the other side too, people who vote for Democrats are like scared that Trump is he's just going to do something bad to them, and the Democrats are going to protect them from him. But like, neither of those things are true. Neither party is going to protect you or defend your interests as a working class person. No. Democrats might defend them a tiny, tiny bit more. But, you know, this is a crisis that cannot be resolved by either of these capitalist neoliberal political parties. And until the working class has its own independent institutions, I hate to sound like a broken record, but it's true, up to and including a party, a workers' party that serves to like stitch all of these different struggles together and build power independently. And, you know, sometimes it might run electoral campaigns, but that's not the only thing a workers' party should do. The working class is not going to have a party that represents its interests. But no, short answer to the question, the GOP is not going to become a multiracial working class party.
Oh, no, they aren't. But I think they can appeal to some of those people. And I think that's why the Charles Booker message, like the hood to the holler, right? Yeah. You guys were talking about that the other day. Right. That's why it's so effective, especially I think in some of those places that the Republicans will try to appeal to.
Yeah, I mean that's why it's so brutal that Schumer foreclosed on us having that project to start working on, because I was listening to Champagne Sharks did 2 great episodes on the Manosphere, which is basically a bunch of black reactionaries who have been sort of organizing online, and they were originally part of like the more alt-right, and then they split off because of, you know, the racist issues we have, but their like fundamental organizing structure is hatred of black women, so that they could find enough, and fundamentally they just—
Are you talking about the Hotep movement?
I mean, partially, yeah. I mean, there's a whole, it's not specifically Hoteps though, or exclusively Hoteps. It's kind of like a lot of incel-ish guys plus pickup artisty type stuff too. And the truth is that like these guys aren't, you know, the mass of black people, but the GOP is organizing them, right? And a lot of those guys don't vote, but a few of them do. And like, that's the thing, is the GOP just needs to improve these margins slightly, and they are going to put in the work. The GOP will literally put in more work to the manosphere than the Democrats are going to put into the hood to the holler, right, which is horrifying, right? Like that's the future of this country.
And I will say that the new white supremacists, like the modern day white supremacists, are very open to, I guess we could call them, I mean, but they probably, you know, the internet term would be one of the good ones. Like they view black people and Latino people who vote Republican or vote conservative or vote Trump as, you know, the race trade. They're leaving how most people in their groups vote behind. They're one of the good ones, and you know they may not think that they're the same, but they'll accept their vote if it means, you know, putting them over the top, and they'll flaunt them too for marketing purposes and for promotional purposes, to show other Latinos and black people and Asian people that, hey, look, there are plenty of blacks, Latinos, and Asians voting for Republicans. You can too. You know, they're in on this. They know what's going to win them elections, and they see that that'll help big time.
Yeah, it does scare me that they have sort of a material response to this crisis that the Democrats really don't, right? Like, even if it's fake, economic nationalism is a powerful idea, right? Because people are scared of losing their jobs. They're afraid for the people who've already lost their jobs. They're pissed off about NAFTA. And they're like, oh, well, maybe economic nationalism makes some sense to solve this crisis. I'm sure maybe they don't think about it in exactly those terms, but like, yeah, Trump said he was going to bring the coal jobs back, and some people believed him. What do the Democrats have to offer? Tax credits, maybe some kind of BS retraining program that's never going to come to pass. Like, people have heard this so many times before, and I just have no faith this kind of technocratic left wing of neoliberalism is going to provide any kind of future for them. But really, like, neither of those options provide a future. It's socialism or barbarism, and we got to spread the word.
Thanks for the call, Josh.
Yep.
I'm so glad you brought up that Marco Rubio thing, because I had seen that and I was like, I wanted to bring it up. It was just, it was like, you trying to steal Bernie's line? What's going on here? Marco Rubio's out there going, we're going to build the multiracial working class coalition. It's like, what? Get the hell out of here. It's not, screw you, man. Let's go to sub-IMs. Let's see what we got here. What happened to Gab, asks Trumpy Bear. Gab became too white supremacist for the right. And I should add an addendum there. It's a bad look. They don't really, the content's not the big deal in terms of them. It's just too
PR.
Yeah, the PR, too much baggage. When you got actual mass shooters on there saying, sharing their feelings and then going out and shooting up synagogues, then you're going to provide a bad PR for the right, no matter how you
wow,
how you
censorship
try to word
much?
things. Yeah, right. But it's still there. It's still there. And I'm sure there are people. I'm sure it's getting a bump from the elections too, just like Parler and MeWe are.
Somebody should start a fake one of those and just steal all of the fascist data and dox them all.
Yeah, that'd be something.
Call it like WeWe or something.
Yeah.
This is a really good IM coming from Dan Purdy. As a black gay man, I just wanted to ask why white people are so awesome. What are we going to do about the epidemic of phone cameras filing cops beating people out of context? Filming cops beating people out of context. For those who don't know, Dan Purdy is the name of the guy who... Did you guys follow the story that happened on Twitter the other day?
Yeah, but we don't want to go too deep into it because we're kind of saving it for Sam on Friday. But you can give people your rundown if.
No, it's okay. I could also just say tune in tomorrow for the Majority Report to find out what what this IM means. There you go. Got to leave people.
Do you, quick Bender though? What do you think he hired that guy, or do you think that guy was a supporter all along? I think he hired him.
I honestly I have no clue. I'm really confused because there's no way that guy sent him that message privately when he was saying.
There's no way that guy's
publicly.
name is Dan either, and also did that guy send the original anti-black tweets? It's possible. It's possible he's would specifically tweet out anti-black stuff, but I think that was prior to. I suspect that was Dean, and he knew some guy who's been hanging around the GOP maybe, and says, "Okay, that guy can be my gay black guy who's been owning this account."
Did you see who did the guy who's claiming he's Dan Purdy? Did you see who he actually is and who he's related to? I don't want to give it away.
I did see that. Yes, Patti LaBelle.
I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
Who's Patti LaBelle? Bender.
What's that?
Tell people who Patti LaBelle is.
I mean,
Broadway star. Broadway
Yeah,
star.
let's
right?
save it for Sam. I don't want to give up too much. Why are we just going to give the whole thing away?
Okay, fair enough.
Man, I'm really going to have to tune in tomorrow.
It's a pretty amazing story, to be honest. I mean, it's when a white Republican from Pennsylvania starts a tweet saying, "I'm a gay black guy." The story is going to be fun regardless of how it turns out. So
I can't get over you telling me not to give too much. We're saving it for Sam.
This is all teaser. I mean, honestly, to do this story justice, we need 40 minutes.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Liz Cheneyland says, if you think Wyoming is going to embrace Marxism, I have a bridge to sell you. What? Is there something I'm missing?
That attitude.
Yeah. Emma, do you like baseball? Asks Fabu Cat.
I would say I do like baseball, but it's definitely in terms of what I watch, football I'm obsessed with. Then hockey, I love the Rangers, and then basketball, and then baseball's way down there. But I love all sports for the most part.
Valley Girl says, Jamie, I joined DSA, went to my first meeting last night. Left is best.
Oh,
that's awesome. Yeah.
Makes me happy. I'd do a shofar if I had the button.
Yes, I would. Yeah. Maybe we make the noise.
Ring the sale bell, folks.
Mo says, can you guys talk about the side hustle culture? The entrepreneur fantasy has a grip on a lot of young workers who view their current material situation as just a phase. I mentioned that last week. You got to tune into last week's show. I brought that up actually. But yeah, I do think a whole thing needs to be done on that, because I do think that's playing a part in all.
Yeah, it's the American ideology.
Lester Spence has a book 5 years or so ago called Knocking the Hustle that you might want to check out.
Oh, I do have to check that out.
I
Who
do
is that?
knock the hustle.
Who wrote that book, did you say?
Lester Spence.
Lester Spence. I don't know, have to check that out. Back to a few more IMs, just like I don't know, 2 more. Shapiro is a midget says, you ever listen to the Fun Half theme at 1.5 times speed? It's just as delicious as you can imagine. Now, if I remember correctly, Matt, that's how you listen to podcasts normally, right? So you would have heard it like that.
I would have exclusively heard it probably faster than that.
You still do that? You still listen to podcasts that way?
Oh yeah, life is short.
Oh, how did we forget? Haircut Hippie says, speaking of who they were confusing Cori Bush with, but this doesn't mean anything for the Baltimore portion of their rant. But Cory Booker, you twits! Oh my god! How did you forget about Cory Booker?
Oh my
yeah,
God.
but that
You
doesn't
think that's
explain
who it
Rove.
was?
Yeah, it doesn't explain
Rove though. Yeah.
Let's not break our brains trying to make sense of these
Yeah,
people.
exactly.
Right.
Booker's also not from Baltimore. Yeah.
Mike G from Canada says, isn't parlor pronounced parlay? It's a French word meaning speak. I believe they call it parlor, but they say they did get it from that word though. Because if it was that word, they would have just said it is that word. But they said it's a play on that word, which is hilarious that a conservative social network would use a French word for anything. After everything we know about the conservatives and the French, I'm surprised they didn't use a freedom word instead. A Square says, Matt Binder, please cover more about that new right-wing social media platform next week with screenshots so we can laugh but also know what's coming. YouTube.com/Matt Binder. I'll be talking about it tonight. And Vaping Goldfish says, Matt Binder, you failed to talk about poop when defining parlor. And he doesn't mean parlor is shit. There is a really funny thing about poop and parlor that I'll break down tonight on youtube.com/Matt Binder. And I guess the final IM of the show, Sterno says, Jimmy Dore isn't a leftist. He's a contrarian. He's a bad copy of Bill Maher, but also DK in Chicago is a good point. We at least have Twitch. AOC stream broke records, and Hassan is the #1 streamer on the platform since the election. That is a good point. Twitch seems to be moving in a direction that other platforms aren't moving in. But unfortunately, one addendum there, Twitch is owned by Jeff Bezos. Guys, it's been a pleasure to talk with you and join you on Thursday's show. I'll be back next Thursday. Again, youtube.com/Matt Binder. I'm going live tonight. Doomedpod.com for the podcast version of the show. Matt Binder at Matt Binder on Twitter, Facebook, anywhere you want to follow me. You guys will all be here tomorrow on the Majority Report, correct?
That's right. We roll deep. Can I do a plug too? I'm going to do it because we've been talking about Bolivia and we've been talking about fascism. And those are two things that we have done recent episodes of the Antifada about. One, where we look at what's happening in Bolivia through the lens of Marx's 18th Brumaire, kind of a left-com perspective. It's sort of in dialogue with the Nick Estes, more ML, more traditional commie perspective. I thought it was super interesting. I learned a lot. Also, Sean and I did an episode on fascism called The Ice Bay Cometh, where we go through some of the definitions of fascism and what we think is going on in the world.
Sounds good. Emma, do you have any fantasy football league you want to promote?
No. I'm ready to go. Let's go.
All right, everyone.
Folks.
Take care.
See
Go
ya.
ahead, Matt.
No, but I just want to say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know